Chapter 2866. After General Haywill finished speaking, he shook his head and laughed a few times. He shrugged his shoulders and said, "Unfortunately, I didn't see the effect I expected. Perhaps I had too high expectations for the Chinese soldiers, so I couldn't accept the difference right away. After a while, when I get used to the combat efficiency of the Chinese soldiers, I think I should have adjusted my mentality." Do you think? General Haywill was very satisfied that his words could silence the surroundings. He was the only one who had the home field. After deliberately pausing for a while, he raised his finger and pointed at the special forces of various countries moving around on the lake. He joked, "Do you think they really think that our competition has to wait until 5 o'clock tomorrow morning? Personally, I don't think they know the biggest difference between the IKA assault competition and the IKA assault competition. Therefore, I really suspect that they don't know that the competition has already started the second they get off the plane. The additional tests are everywhere. There will never be a real start. If they really think that the real competition has to wait until 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, then it will definitely be a very bad start. It will be a start that they will never forget." His words made the generals sent by the other countries laugh involuntarily. I think that there is indeed such a possibility. After all, it is their first time participating. This is a process. We just have to wait for them to get used to it. We just have to wait for their exciting reaction at that moment. I think it will be quite exciting. As a big country, China has shown so many self-developed weapons in 1999. We have seen their low-key style of doing things for a long time. Suddenly, a big explosion shocked the whole world. Perhaps the soldiers sent by China this time are the same. They are low-key in the early stages, but in the later stages, they will surprise us again and again. China has always been humble. They are clearly strong in some aspects, but they always like to say that they are just SOSO. I think it will be the same this time. Maybe because they are humble, there are no exciting points in the early stages. If that's the case, then I'm looking forward to it again. Listening to the generals from the surrounding countries, General Haywill, who was holding the binoculars with both hands and looking into the distance, spoke again. "I hope the Chinese soldiers and the soldiers from the other 3 countries will give us a huge surprise." It was unknown which country's general was the first to laugh. Then, the generals from a few other countries also laughed. This kind of laughter was full of contempt and a sense of superiority. They had already determined that the Chinese soldiers would definitely lose badly in this competition, so much so that they would not dare to participate in the next IKA assault competition. It was not that they did not believe in the strength of the Chinese soldiers. It was just that the soldiers sent by the Chinese side and the other 3 countries were all participating in the competition for the first time. The first-time participants were not familiar with the uncertainty and changes of the IKA assault competition, and they did not understand that the reason why the IKA assault competition was called the competition without death was because there were too many variables and too much flexibility. Sometimes the participating soldiers did not have time to react at all, thus making mistakes and finally losing points. And these variables and uncertainties were not notified in advance. Even the soldiers of various countries who had participated in the competition several times, although they knew the characteristics of the IKA assault competition, they might not know what kind of difficulties awaited them next, nor what would happen in the next second. Chapter 2867. However, compared to the Chinese soldiers who were participating for the first time, at least they knew that the competition had already begun the moment they set foot on this land. Therefore, they had already won against the Chinese soldiers who knew nothing about the competition. The laughter did not stop. Instead, it echoed around the spectator stands. There was no lack of foreign generals who wanted to see the Chinese soldiers embarrass themselves. When they used binoculars to observe the Chinese soldiers again, the expressions in their eyes changed slightly. They had put on color glasses. There was a Chinese saying that went, "Snobs look down on people." Why they look down on people? Because it was said that dogs looked at things the other way around. They saw long things as short and tall things as short. Therefore, dogs were very bold. They would even dare to bite things that were bigger than them. General Haywill was currently making this mistake. Wearing color glasses affected his judgment and thinking. He could not analyze and treat the situation objectively and fairly. No one stood out to point out the bias in General Haywell's words. This was because these people also thought that the Chinese soldiers who came to participate in the IKA assault for the first time were just SOSO. There was no obvious highlight. A general from another country, who was wearing a grayish-blue military uniform and a rather exaggerated military cap, which was obviously different from the military caps worn by the entire observation group, glanced at General Haywell coldly and said with a smile, "I don't think the Chinese soldiers expect General Haywell to have any hope at all. After all, it's not a good thing to be targeted by a competitor." This was a general from a country that was known for its fighting ethnicities. His light gray eyes were a little cold. There was a hint of teasing in his smiling voice. He seemed to be particularly lively as he said, "No one likes to be remembered by a competitor. I think the special forces of General Haywell's country are the same, right?" "Of course, but I'm not thinking about it. I just want to know more." General Haywell raised his eyebrows and looked at the general who was also from a big country. "There's no need to think about it. I'm just lamenting. I don't mean anything else. General Callisler, please don't misunderstand." No. I didn't misunderstand anything. I was just saying." "General Haywell, please don't misunderstand." General Callisler, who was from a fighting ethnicities, replied with a laugh. His laughter had the sternness of a big country, but it did not appear to be offensive. The commander of the Estonian National Defense Force opened his mouth. He thought that if he didn't open his mouth, these two generals from big countries would continue to talk. Perhaps some disharmony might occur, which he didn't want to see. They've already crossed the center of the lake. Now, we could take the mountain bike to a higher place to watch their upcoming exciting competition. The commander of the Estonian National Defense Force made a please gesture and took the lead to get off the platform. He then walked towards a mountain bike parked at the edge of the forest. The conversation between the two of them ended amicably. When they walked down from the viewing platform, General Haywell even had the intention to ask General Callisler to leave first. He was elegant and magnanimous. He indeed had the demeanor of a great nation. General Carlyle was only one step ahead, and then he traveled together with General Haywell, and they were even in the same carriage. Along the way, the two generals who had been secretly arguing with each other were like good friends who hadn't seen each other for many years. They had a very pleasant conversation, and it was impossible to tell that they had a brief exchange of words just now. Chapter 2868. They were evenly matched. Since they could instantly crush the other party, they could also shake hands and make peace with the other party. This was how the strong met with the strong. Xia Jinyuan and the others did not know that the generals of the two countries had a brief exchange of words because of them. The 8 of them worked together to cross the center of the lake and would reach the other side in about an hour. The inland lake was quite large. If they were just crossing it, it would not take much time. However, they were not crossing it, but going against the current. From the other side of the lake to the other side of the lake, it would take a long time. When the special forces of the 12 countries all rowed the rubber boats across the center of the lake, Yi Qian, who was sitting on the left side of the rubber boat, suddenly stopped paddling. She whistled softly, telling her comrades that there was a situation under the water. All her comrades looked at her face. Yi Qian held the paddling right hand and pointed her thumb towards the bottom of the water. "There is an ambush under the water. Be careful." Just now, when she was paddling under the water, the paddle hit something hard. She did not know what it was exactly, but she was sure that it was a living thing. When she hit it a second time, there was no obstacle under the water. It was obvious that it had swum away. "Don't move. Continue paddling." Xia Jinyuan made a gesture to be quiet. His index and middle fingers moved back and forth like a little person. "They're not responding. Let's not make a move." It was better to keep a low profile in their first confrontation. This was not a technical competition, so there was no need to show off their skills and let others see. The special forces of the Snowfield Brigade used the words of the water demons of the Storm Assault to say, "They're a group of King cunning bastards. Don't play dirty with them. Whoever plays dirty loses." At this time, the shark and eel experienced the craftiness of the Snowfield Brigade's most cunning bastards. Everyone pretended not to know what was going on under the water and continued to paddle forward. Under the water, an Estonian soldier dived deeper into the water. At the same time, his comrade beside him immediately put on the breathing mask that Yuchien had slapped away. 3 minutes left. Get ready. The Estonian underwater combat soldier put on his mask and gestured to the Estonian soldiers who were lying in ambush underwater to make the best preparations before the operation. The lake was vast, and the water was deep and green. Even if there were huge water monsters hiding at the bottom of the lake, they wouldn't be discovered easily. The Estonian soldiers who were hiding underwater had been waiting for a long time. They followed the rubber boats closely and appeared quietly like fish. Not even a single bubble emerged from the bottom of the water. The rubber band members at the front were from countries in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Northern Europe, and Southern Europe. The Chinese soldiers were not the only ones who discovered the underwater situation. The special forces from 3 countries with strong military strength also discovered the situation. Keep an eye on it and stabilize the rubber boat. Remember, I want to see the rubber boat that will allow us to cross the lake as soon as possible get snatched away. The commander of the American Special Forces, who was walking at the front, swept his cold gaze across the faces of his team members. His deep-set facial features revealed a bloodthirsty ferocity. We're soldiers who walked out of the water. I will never allow us to lose points in the water. Do you understand? Understood. 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 Several voices were heard. Then 2 team members on the left and right of the rubber boat flipped into the water. They would never sit still and wait for death. They would only take the initiative to attack. Chapter 28:69. They were too far away from the rubber boats behind them, and the sound of them falling into the water did not reach the ears of the Chinese soldiers. The closest to them were the special forces of a country with a royal family. When they heard the sound of the American Special Forces falling into the water, they immediately realized that there was a situation under the water. Be careful under the water. There may be a group of guys hiding under the water who want to overturn our rubber boats. Guys, hold the oars in your hands tightly. Don't let them have a chance to drag you down. After the commander finished speaking, he raised his head and looked behind him. His gaze passed through several rubber boats and finally fell on the rubber boat with the Chinese flag. He wanted to know if the Chinese soldiers had discovered the underwater danger. He wanted to know if this country, which has always been low-key, could give everyone a shock. He was not the only one who wanted to know. He believed that the special forces of several countries also wanted to know, especially the border country with a big gap between the rich and the poor. They must want to know the strength of the Chinese soldiers. Just wait, soldiers from the Chinese side. I hope you can pass the next few days safely. The commander from a Western European country on Great Britain Island had a cold smile on his face, and his eyes flashed with eagerness to fight the Chinese soldiers. The Chinese side had a total of 3 countries, the United States, the border country, and a Western European country on Great Britain Island. The winner and loser would be determined by the score. The border country also stared at the Chinese soldiers who had not responded until now. Their leader, Shah Rukh, pressed the corners of his mouth, and there was a contemptuous smile in his eyes. This group of Chinese soldiers who think they are great are really a group of self-righteous guys. Look, they are still paddling the rubber boats, and they have not noticed the situation under the water at all. What a group of pitiful guys. They will definitely die very ugly. Oh, no. IKA assault is a competition without death. So, they won't die a horrible death, but they'll end up in a horrible state. They'll be forced to cover their faces with the military cap on their heads, not daring to be seen by others as they return home with their tails between their legs. Shah Rukh said to his team members with a smile on his face, "Let's work together to make their end even uglier." Haha, no problem. We will work hard to make those self-righteous guys end up very ugly. From now on, they will take a detour when they see us. If that's the case, that's great. I really hope that day will come. Don't worry, there will definitely be. We are a powerful military country. How can they compare to us? How can a country that doesn't even have the ability to buy an aircraft carrier compare to us? The laughter was so arrogant that even the Estonian soldiers underwater could hear it. It It was also heard by the Special Forces soldiers from the fighting nation who were closest to them. Hearing that, the Special Forces of the combat tribe could not help but laugh. They were not mocking the Chinese side with the border countries. They were mocking the soldiers of the border countries who were boasting. In my eyes, they are really a bunch of pitiful fellows. What kind of strength is buying an aircraft carrier to return to the country? All right, buddy, let them continue to be satisfied. We'll just watch from the side. A bunch of self-righteous guys saying surprising things. I prefer the low-key Chinese side. Chapter 2870. The Special Forces from the fighting nation couldn't understand the thinking of the SFS Border Defense Force at all. The aircraft carriers they owned were not built by their own country. What was there to be proud of when they bought them at a high price and modified them before entering the water? Did China not have the ability to buy aircraft carriers? It was impossible. From the weapons they developed and the analysis of the military investment by China's military experts, China had the ability to buy aircraft carriers from other countries. But China didn't. What did this mean? It meant that China was more willing to use their own aircraft carriers. Even if China didn't have an aircraft carrier now, who could say for sure what the future would hold? With the Chinese side's down-to-earth strength, one step at a time, he fully believed that they would become a powerful country sooner or later. Then, they wouldn't be far from having their own aircraft carriers. And the SFS Border Defense Force was proud of buying aircraft carriers from other countries. Who knew what they were thinking? An aircraft carrier decommissioned in 1997 was built in Western Europe in 1943. What was there to be proud of when it was sold to a border country at high price after being decommissioned in their own country for 18 years? What a pitiful guy. The first time they bought an aircraft carrier from another country, and the second time they did the same. Even if they were the overlords of tens of thousands of square kilometers of territorial waters, they still didn't rely on their own strength to produce an aircraft carrier with their own technology. China had the strength. When China had its own aircraft carrier, hopefully the SFS Border Defense Force would continue to be like today, proud of having the ability to buy aircraft carriers decommissioned by other countries. The fighting nation that passed by the SFS Border Defense Force left behind the same laughter as they paddled their rubber boats a few meters away. The leader of the battle commanders, Nikonov, even waved at Shah Rukh and said in English, "Good luck, buddy." "Thank you, and good luck to you too." Shah Rukh waved back to show his courtesy. Nikonov held back his laughter, and when he looked away, the smile on his face had disappeared. "They're here. Get ready, my brothers." The calm water suddenly became turbulent. A Western European country on Great Britain Island had already started an underwater battle with the Estonian soldiers. Then, the other rubber boats were attacked almost at the same time. Yi Qian jumped off the rubber boat and jumped into the water. With an unsharpened underwater combat dagger in her mouth, she rushed at one of the Estonian soldiers who raised his dagger and tried to pierce the rubber boat. There were a total of 20 Estonian soldiers surrounding the Chinese rubber boats. Like the other countries, 20 Estonian soldiers were attacking underwater at the same time. Their first goal was to deflate the inflatable rubber boats of the other countries so that the special forces participating in the competition wouldn't be able to cross the lake and reach the shore. After Yi Jian discovered their intentions, she swung her legs upward. After entering the water, her graceful figure was like a mermaid. She quickly and fiercely hugged the Estonian soldier's legs and pulled him down forcefully. The Estonian soldier was immediately pulled away from the rubber boat by Yi Jian. Underwater, Li Jinyan gestured to Yi Qian. This was the first time the two siblings cooperated in an underwater battle, and it depended on how good their cooperation was. Only Xia Jinyuan, T6, and Sparrow Hawk were left on the boat. Xia Jinyuan was responsible for all aspects of defense, while T6 and Sparrow Hawk moved their arms and paddled the boat away from the area of attack. Underwater, 5 Chinese soldiers were fighting against 20 Estonian soldiers. Chapter 2871. Fighting underwater was much more dangerous than fighting on land, especially when there was no oxygen supply. The risk factor of fighting underwater was multiplied, and no one could guarantee that they would come out alive. IKA assault was famous for being a competition without death. Therefore, its danger lay in the fact that the probability of death was almost zero. It was a real battle, and it could make the participating special forces feel that death was right beside them and had never left. The special forces that could participate in IKA assault were all soldiers who had blood on their hands. Once the battle started, even if it was a competition without death, their ferocity and ruthlessness would not change, and they would only fight to kill their opponents. There were 12 special forces from 12 different countries in the lake, and each country had 8 participants. On the other hand, there were a total of 2,400 Estonian soldiers underwater, and there were 200 people in each group. Just the disparity in numbers was enough to make one tremble in fear. However, there were only 20 Estonian soldiers who participated in the battle. If all 200 of them were to surround the boat, the whole lake would be boiling like dumplings, and there would be no way to move their arms and legs. The Estonian soldiers who did not participate in the battle had underwater filming, underwater medical treatment, and could act in time in the face of sudden accidents. Underwater was not like on land, and it was very difficult to rescue someone when something happened underwater. In addition, there were undercurrents in the lake. If someone was sucked away by the undercurrents and they did not act in time, there would be casualties in the warm-ups of the competition. The 20 Estonian soldiers were like ferocious monsters in the water. They fiercely bit the participating special forces of each country and stabbed the inflatable rubber boat with the sharp combat daggers in their hands. Yi Qian had just dragged an Estonian soldier away when another Estonian soldier bypassed the defensive position and moved his hands like a swordfish, approaching the rubber boat. Seeing the dagger in his hand, Yi Qian did not think too much. She knew that she had to stop the dagger in the soldier's hand and not let him pierce the rubber boat. The eel appeared from the side and wrapped around the Estonian soldier who was about to pierce the rubber boat with the dagger. It quickly reminded Yi Qian to pay attention to the bottom. It turned out that the Estonian soldier who was dragged into the water by Yi Qian directly rushed up from the water after a short moment of adjustment. Yi Qian, who received the warning from her comrade, did not immediately turn her head. Instead, when she felt the water rushing up from under her feet, she suddenly swung her hand sideways. She was originally swimming upwards, but she unexpectedly turned her head and swooped down. She swooped down towards the Estonian soldier who was trying to grab the wrist under her feet. The change in direction was too sudden, and the Estonian soldier was not prepared at all. But he rushed up with all his might, while Yi Qian rushed down with all her might. One was unprepared, while the other was prepared. Just when their heads were very close to each other, Yi Qian swung the dagger in her hand horizontally. Her speed was so fast that it seemed to cut the water in half. Gurgle, 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 gurgle. Whoosh, whoosh. The sound of fighting under the water could be heard continuously. The entire lake was filled with layers of waves crashing against the shore. In the middle of the lake, there were even whirlpools formed due to the intense fighting. Chapter 2872. Countless bubbles emerged from the cut oxygen tubes. Layer after layer of bubbles rushed to the surface of the water. The Estonian soldier who had lost his oxygen source quickly kicked his legs towards the surface of the water. When she brushed past Yi Qian, he gave her a thumbs up. A soldier from China, a female soldier from China. She moved as fiercely as a shark underwater and as fast as a swordfish. Her bravery was not inferior to that of a male soldier. At this moment, Yi Qian knew the rules. As long as he pulled off his opponent's mask and stopped her from breathing normally, he would win. Huff, 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 huff. Countless Estonian soldiers with their masks destroyed and oxygen tubes cut rushed out of the water. Wearing black rubber diving suits, they wiped off the water droplets on their faces and crossed their arms across the water surface. Then, they swung their legs and approached the shore according to the route. An Estonian soldier with long and curly eyelashes and a pair of bright and clear grayish-blue eyes said to the worker beside him, "The female soldier from China is very powerful, unbelievably powerful." The female soldier who entered the water was very fierce. I had the illusion that I was bitten to death by a female crocodile. "Congratulations, buddy. You can't even defeat a female soldier. Come on, buddy. Even if she's a female soldier, she is also a special forces female soldier. She is much stronger than us. Otherwise, she would not be representing China in the competition. However, are you sure that the one who attacked you is really a female soldier and not a skinny male soldier? You should know that the Chinese men are not tall and don't have strong muscles. They look very easy to defeat. Stop bragging, buddy. Don't forget that the Chinese have mysterious martial arts. Hey, they can use their small fists to break your nose. The person who climbed to the shore imitated the signature roar of a martial arts star. He raised his fists left and right and finished his mission together with his comrades. No one stood on the shore and waited for the other workers to come up. Once they reached the shore, they immediately regrouped and returned to their original positions to continue their next mission. The battle under the huge lake was not over yet. 20 targets needed to be dealt with was not a small matter. The 5 people who entered the water meant that each of them had to deal with 4 targets. Yi Qian rushed out of the water and only had time to take a breath of oxygen before his legs were grabbed by someone. It was as if his legs were bitten by an underwater crocodile, and he was dragged underwater at a ferocious speed. Being dragged into the water like this would undoubtedly cause a mental breakdown. As a special forces soldier who had undergone systematic underwater training, Yi Qian immediately held her breath. The moment she was dragged underwater, she lowered her head to take a look at the situation underwater and quickly made the most advantageous move for her to escape. The Estonian soldier who dragged Yi Qian into the water did not know that he was facing a female soldier. The moment he hugged her legs, he felt that they were not a pair of male legs. They were so slender that he felt like he would break the bones if he used a little more strength. He did not have time to think, nor would he think about what kind of legs he was hugging. He only had one goal, which was to entangle the Chinese soldier underwater for 4 minutes and take away the armband on his arm. Then, the Chinese soldier would lose points in the preliminary assessment. Every Estonian soldier who fought underwater had only one goal. It did not matter whether their target was male or female. Chapter 2873. Yi Qian, who was sinking into the water, bent over. Her waist was incredibly soft and flexible, making her form a V shape. This way, she could wrap her arms around the Estonian soldier's neck and complete the attack on his mask. The Estonian soldier was not easy to deal with. Seeing this, he immediately let go of his hands. After he let go, he regretted it. This Chinese soldier was like a snake, and he was entangled by her. He quickly moved left and right to avoid her dagger. He reached out his hands and attacked Yi Qian's wrists. He wanted to snatch the dagger from Yi Qian's hands first. Behind her, an Estonian soldier wearing a black rubber diving suit approached Yi Qian. He reached out his arm and wrapped it around Yi Qian's neck. His other hand was trying to clamp down on Yi Qian's right hand, which was holding the dagger, to make it easier for his comrade to move. Ever since Yi Qian entered the water from the rubber boat, she knew that they were surrounded. She also knew that she would not be facing just one person. She had to be on guard at all times for someone else to ambush her. Behind her, Yi Qian, who was pincered from the front and back, reacted quickly. She swam sideways and escaped from the attack. At the same time, she quickly turned sideways and swam towards the back of the Estonian soldier who attacked her first. She was so fast that the Estonian soldier who attacked her from behind felt his heart sink. He hurried over to help his comrade. Before he could get close, Li Jinyan appeared beside him as if out of thin air. He reached out and grabbed the other person's oxygen tube. He used his shoulder to fiercely knock away the other person's resisting arm, and with lightning speed, he used his dagger to cut off another oxygen tube. At this point, the Chinese soldiers had taken care of 8 Estonian soldiers. These 8 were the Estonian soldiers who were holding Yi Qian and Li Jinyan back. The remaining 12 Estonian soldiers continued to hold onto the rubber boat. An Estonian soldier had just popped his head out of the water and raised his dagger to pierce the rubber boat. Just as he raised his arm, the mask on his face was ripped off by Xia Jinyuan, who was on the boat. "Comrade, you can go back to the shore and rest for a while before continuing your next mission." Xia Jinyuan, whose handsome face was painted with oil paint, smiled at him. His white teeth reflected a cold light under the sunlight. See you later. The Estonian soldier, who had his mask ripped off, frowned. The smile of the Chinese soldier in front of him reminded him of an animal. A wolf. It was ferocious, ruthless, and filled with coldness. It was so cold that there was not a trace of warmth. This was a soldier from the Chinese side, a soldier who made him feel as if his heart was wrapped in a ball of ice. Good luck, my friend. The Estonian soldier felt a chill in his heart and did not stay any longer. He swam towards the shore with his comrade whose mask was torn off. Good luck, good luck. Xia Jinyuan smiled again. After the other party swam away, he stared at the water. 10 of them have been killed. It seems that there are more ambushes under the water. You two stabilize the rubber boat. I will go and support them. 10 of them have been killed, but Greenbird and the Devil King had not boarded the dinghy yet. These Estonian soldiers had boldly jumped out of the water and pierced the dinghy. It was obvious that the underwater battle was still ongoing, and his comrades needed reinforcements. After he finished speaking, he plunged into the water. His tall and straight body became like a dragon in the water. He joined the battle with ferocity that seemed to be able to flatten the entire lake. Chapter 2874. Yi Qian and Li Jinyan came out of the water at the same time to take a breath. They didn't have time to check their surroundings before they dived back into the water to fight the Estonian soldiers who were holding them back. The two of them saw their own rubber dinghies and also saw Xia Jinyuan, who was like a flood dragon diving into the water. Li Jinyan gestured for them to split up. Yi Qian immediately separated from him and quickly approached the rubber dinghies that were less than 4 meters away from them. G3 and the other two had been guarding the rubber dinghies the entire time. They had to defend and attack at the same time, so naturally, they couldn't take care of their targets, as well as Qing Niao and Devil King, who only needed to attack. However, they still didn't let the Estonian soldiers break through their line of defense. Yi Qian and Li Jinyan rushed over from the left and right sides. There were only 10 Estonian soldiers left holding the rubber dinghies back. Now, it was 6 against 10, and their chances of winning were greatly improved. Go down even more and disrupt their formation. Pay attention to your back. Don't let them hug you. Split into groups of 2 on the left and right sides. Attack from top to bottom, 1 person in each group. Coordinate with the left and right sides. Yi Qian, defend. Hold the outer perimeter. I'm on this side, you're on this side. Just cut them. The underwater communication was completed quickly with hand signals. After a short exchange, the 6 of them cooperated and began their final attack. The Estonian soldiers, who had oxygen and could breathe freely underwater, targeted Yi Qian because they had already discovered that Yi Qian was a female soldier. Female soldiers were easier to deal with for male soldiers. 2 Estonian soldiers had completed their combat communication through a string of bubbles. Yi Qian, who was guarding the outer perimeter, only needed to deal with 1 Estonian soldier who rushed out of the water. However, 2 Estonian soldiers who were holding back G3 suddenly turned around and rushed towards Yi Qian, who was very close to them. Yi Qian needed to take a breath. When she saw 2 people rushing towards her, her reaction was always interesting. She wasn't in a hurry to rush out of the water. Instead, her counterattack was even more violent. She was like a crocodile searching for food in the water. She used her fist to reduce the resistance of the water as close as possible and punched her opponent's cheekbone. If she could, she wanted to punch her opponent's nose bridge. That way, it would be so painful that he would have a nosebleed. The Estonian soldier's cheekbone was also quite painful. His entire cheek was burning hot from the punch, and his head tilted to the side. By the time he punched out of the water, Yi Qian had already circled around to his back. Up! A, to breathe. Yi Qian, who was taking a breath, quickly scanned the lake. She could only see a few rubber boats in front of her that were not fully manned. It was obvious that they were all entangled by the Estonian soldiers underwater. That's good. Their progress is almost the same. Xia Jinyuan came out of the water. He looked at Yi Jian face to face with a distance of about 2 meters between them. Although both of their faces were covered with thick paint, they were very familiar with each other. Even so, they could recognize the comrade in arms at first glance. They only looked at each other for a short moment. Without any other eye contact, they dived into the water together. When one of the Estonian soldiers saw this, he decided to stop fighting with the Chinese soldiers. He gestured to his comrade and quickly withdrew from the battle and swam towards the Chinese rubber boat. Chapter 2875. There was a red number 10 at the bottom of the rubber boat. This was to ensure that the Estonian soldiers would not attack the wrong target. Yi Qian, who had entered the water again, had her right hand gripped tightly by the enemy. The male soldier, who was wearing a waterproof eye mask, exerted more strength in his strong arms. He wanted to twist Yi Qian's wrist and force Yi Qian to throw away the dagger in her hand. Yi Jian, who was guarding the periphery, saw the Estonian soldier who had rushed out of the battle circle and swam toward the rubber boat. With a fierce look in her eyes, she tightened her lower abdomen. With the force of her right hand being clasped tightly by the soldier, she used the soldier's arm as a support point and suddenly raised her legs directly. While pulling the soldier's body, she used her legs to attack the soldier's head. Then, with the force of a twist, her left hand tightly clasped the soldier's wrist. In this way, if the soldier did not let go, there would only be 2 consequences. 1, his arm would be dislocated by Yi Jian. 2, his head would be clamped by Yi Jian's legs. She was guarding the perimeter. She could not let the Estonian soldier break through the perimeter and pierce the rubber boat. Once the rubber boat was pierced, not only would they lose points, but it would also affect their speed of crossing the lake and reaching the other shore. She had to stop this. Every Estonian soldier who fought Yi Qian would make a mistake. They all underestimated the flexibility of Yi Qian's body and her ferocity, which was comparable to that of the male soldiers. The Estonian soldier, who originally thought that victory was in his grasp, no longer dared to clamp Yi Qian's wrist. He let go of Yi Qian's wrist with one hand and wrapped it around Yi Qian's calf. He wanted to grab onto Yi Qian's ankle again so that he could continue to gain the upper hand. Yi Qian would not give him another chance. She kicked hard on the soldier's shoulder and escaped as fast as she could. After escaping, she did not fight with the Estonian soldier. Instead, she locked on her target, who was swimming towards the rubber boat, and attacked him. She wanted to stop her target. Li Jinyan, who was rushing over, saw that Yi Qian had the same target as him. His tall and slender body agilely flipped in the water, his legs kicking in the water as he attacked the same target as Yi Qian. Puff! Gulp! Gulp! The Estonian soldier who had his mask removed immediately exhaled a large amount of air bubbles. Li Jinyan removed his mask, while Yi Qian used his dagger to cut off the oxygen tube. Yi Qian covered her nose with one hand and pressed the oxygen tube that was still bubbling under her nose. She did not have a mask to inhale oxygen, so she used her hand as a mask to complete a short respiration. Go up, I'll stand guard. Seeing her tense expression, Li Jinyan pointed at the surface of the water and made a gesture. There are only 3 of them. Hold them back first. You go up and observe the situation. Yi Qian understood what he meant. She paddled her legs and got out of the water. She saw that the American Special Forces had already started to board the rubber boat one by one. At this time, the underwater battle had been going on for about 40 minutes, but this group of Western Special Forces was still full of strength when they boarded the rubber boat. The rumors from the outside world were not false. The Special Forces from the American Triamphibious Special Forces were indeed very powerful. Then, she saw the Special Forces of the fighting nation start to board the boat. On the left, a certain country from Great Britain Island had also solved their difficulties. Their comrades on the rubber boat held their hands and started to board the boat. The SFS border guards, who had looked down on the Chinese soldiers from the beginning, had not started to board the boat. It was obvious that their underwater battle was not over yet. Chapter 2876. Don't go too fast. Don't go too slow. Just do in the middle. Yi Qian thought to himself, before diving back into the cold water. Estonia had an oceanic climate. The average temperature in July, the hottest month of summer, was only 16 degrees Celsius. The temperature in the eastern part of Estonia was 3 to 4 degrees lower than outside. Although the sun was out, the temperature was only 19 degrees. The temperature underwater was even lower, only around 14 to 15 degrees. The moment one entered the water, it was bone-chilling cold. Yi Qian seemed to be used to the temperature of the water. Although the corners of her mouth were white, her eyes were sharp and cold. She was not afraid of the coldness of the lake at all. She had undergone cold resistance training. Although the lake water was 14 to 15 degrees Celsius cold, she did not feel much coldness as she had been fighting underwater. After entering the water again, Yi Qian discovered that there were only 2 Estonian soldiers who were holding back the Chinese soldiers. These 2 were very difficult to deal with and were deliberately left behind by Xia Jinyuan and Li Jinyan. Through the underwater cameras, the observation team saw that the Chinese soldiers who managed to escape were obviously exhausted. Even the ferocity of their attacks had weakened a lot. They almost let the Estonian soldiers escape. General Haywell's fingers tapped lightly a few times, as if he was playing a piano. He turned his head and smiled at General Kallisler, who was from the fighting nation. General Kallisler, the Chinese soldiers are just as I said. Look at them. This is just a warm-up before the match. The Estonian soldiers who are holding them back are still ordinary soldiers, but they are already exhausted. General Kallisler, how far do you think they can go? I'm very sorry to tell you that these Chinese soldiers will definitely disappoint you. No other country dared to compete with their country, not even the fighting nation. Their country was the true overlord of the world. That was the case in the past, in the present, and in the future. He had to let the generals of the other countries realize that their country could never win against a true overlord of the world. The right choice for them was to bow down and follow the footsteps of the overlord into the future. They chose to become enemies with the overlord of the world. Look at the outcome of those countries who had become enemies with the overlord of the world. They were still at war even now. As for China, it was impossible for them to catch up with the overlord of the world. So what if it had a vast territory? It was still a developing country, not a developed one. General Haywill raised his chin slightly, revealing the arrogance of his country. He smiled and said, "But I hope that General Kallisler won't be angered by the upcoming competition. This is just a competition, not a battle of life and death." It was only because Kallisler wasn't used to Haywill's arrogance that he said a few words. Now, he needed to be mocked by Haywill from time to time. The generals of the surrounding countries looked at each other and remained silent. They had made up their minds not to get involved. General Haywill was not talking about his own country. He was only talking about how the military of a country that was widely recognized as a developing country could not compare to other countries. Why should they stand out? General Kallisler, who had been called out again, calmly met General Haywill's gaze with his grayish-blue eyes. He then smiled faintly and said, "It's just a warm-up match. We need to conserve our energy for tomorrow's competition. General Haywill has come to a conclusion too early. Since the Chinese side sent these 8 special forces to participate in the competition, they must have gone through many rounds of selection. Now, none of US can come to a conclusion about how strong they are. General Haywill's premature comments are unfair." Chapter 2877. The generals of other countries did not want to go against General Haywill, who came from a Western hegemonic country, but General Kallisler did not have that many scruples. Just like General Haywill, he also had a powerful country behind him. What was there to be afraid of? There was nothing to be afraid of. Fairness and justice also needed to be upheld. He stood up only to let General Haywill understand that he should not look at the soldiers from China with a biased gaze. The calm General Kallisler met General Haywill's cold gaze and continued calmly. Assault is a fair competition. It is an exchange between the special forces of each country. Regardless of whether there will be regrets in the end, I think the exchange is the most important. General Haywill, what do you think? This was a subtle hint that the country behind General Haywill was too domineering and did not want to see any country become strong enough to threaten their country's position. Such a domineering way of thinking was really disgusting. General Haywill's face was filled with anger when he heard the implied meaning, but he quickly suppressed it and smiled in a relaxed manner. Of course, this is only a competition, not a war between two countries. Our real goal is to communicate with each other. However, although the exchange is our real goal, the competition is also a competition of strength. It is a confrontation between the strong and the weak. The strong will continue to advance, and the weak will be disqualified. There are bound to be winners and losers in terms of strength, and the special forces participating are all fighting for the competition and glory. If they really lose too badly, their international reputation will be affected. I think General Callisler wouldn't want his country's special forces to lose. General Haywill attacked again, but General Callisler calmly accepted it. General Haywill's words are very reasonable. No country wants to lose, so it is the same for the special forces from China. Even if others think they will lose, they will still fight for their country's honor and not want to lose the competition. So, General Haywill, please wait until the results of the competition are out before expressing your regret to the Chinese soldiers. However, I personally think that General Haywill will not have the chance to express your regret for the Chinese soldiers. It seems that General Callisler has a lot of confidence in the Chinese soldiers. Then let's continue watching. I hope the performance of the Chinese soldiers will get better and better. General Haywill, who was rebutted again, put his hands on the railing of the mountain bike and replied with a fake smile. The commander-in-chief of Estonia smiled at the conversation between the two generals. This kind of scene happened every year, and he was already used to it. There was more or less some discord between these two powerful countries. Both of them were high-ranking generals, so they could control their temper very well and would not do anything that would be beneath their dignity. Therefore, he just listened and did not need to get involved. The Chinese soldiers have started boarding. Not bad, they're ranked 5th, 5 minutes behind the SFS Border Defense Army. Not bad. The general from the country, known as the Nation of 10,000 Islands, raised his binoculars and saw the Chinese soldiers boarding the boat. He couldn't help but speak. 12 countries were participating in the competition, and the Chinese soldiers were the 5th to board the airship. They were ahead of the 7 countries behind them. This kind of strength could not be said to be weak. At least, it was not as weak as General Haywill had said. However, it couldn't be said to be very strong. There were still 4 countries ahead of them, and all of them took far longer to board than China. Chapter 2878. The SFS Border Defense Force, ranked 4th, boarded the boat 10 minutes before the Chinese soldiers. Ranked 1st was the Special Forces of General Haywill's country. They were far ahead of the 11 countries behind them. It could be said that their country's special forces were ahead of the other 11 countries. It was no wonder General Haywill was so arrogant. He had the right to be arrogant. But now, his arrogance was tinged with coldness. He was the 5th person to board the boat. He thought that he would at least be ranked 8th or 9th. His best result would definitely not be in the top 5. He didn't expect the Chinese soldiers to be in the top 5. General Haywill tightened his grip on the binoculars. Through the lens, he saw the last Chinese soldier board the boat with the help of his team members. At this point, the warm-up for the underwater battle was over. Looks like General Callisler's guess was right. I shouldn't have underestimated the strength of the Chinese soldiers. They are indeed much stronger than I thought. General Haywill maintained his composure and admitted his mistake. So what if they were in the top 5? They were still far inferior to their country's special forces. It could only be said that the Chinese had improved a lot in the past few years. It could be seen from their grand celebration that the country's military strength had improved. The strength of the entire army had also improved. These 2 points were worthy of their vigilance. When the SFS Border Defense Force, ranked 4th, saw the Chinese soldiers boarding the boat less than 10 minutes behind them, Shahruk's face twisted. Damn it, they're here too. They were 10 minutes earlier than he expected. He couldn't accept it. Hurry up and row. We must reach the shore half an hour before the Chinese soldiers. Shahrukh gritted his teeth. His eyes were filled with determination to defeat the Chinese soldiers. They had to let the Chinese soldiers understand that the SFS Border Defense Force was not a special force they could afford to provoke. Their hostility is too deep. We have to be careful when we compete with them. Xia Jinyuan put down the binoculars in his hand and said to his comrades, who were all wet and panting but whose lips were pale from the cold, "Be careful and stay alert. We are now being watched by the SFS Border Defense Army." Yi Qian, who was wringing his clothes to keep himself warm, looked into the distance and asked Xia Jinyuan, "They are very hostile to us. I see the flames of revenge in Shahrukh's eyes. Was the pilot who escaped from our country's airspace the last time a member of the SFS Border Defense Force?" The report did not mention which border country the pilot who died in the plane crash was from, but the flames of revenge in Shahrukh's eyes were too obvious. Considering that the SFS Border Defense Force was a special force that spied on other countries' military intelligence, Yi Qian suspected that the pilot who died in the plane crash was from the SFS Border Defense Force. China did not disclose which border country the pilot belonged to and pretended not to know anything. However, Xia Jinyuan and Li Jingyan knew. The other comrades, including Yi Qian, didn't know. Now that Yi Qian asked, Li Jingyan, who was closest to her, raised his hand, which was cold from the lake water, and gently rubbed her head. No one will disclose this information. Even if we know, we have to pretend not to know. The other party will also pretend that the pilot who died in the plane crash is not their comrade. Chapter 2879. There are some things that can't be said in detail. It's fine as long as you know it. You definitely didn't pass the political science class. In the future, you'd better do some technical work obediently. Leave these brain-intensive things to our country's diplomats. Li Jingyan felt a little helpless when faced with his sister's frankness. She was a smart girl, but all her intelligence was used in battle. His sister didn't care much about things that required more attention. At the mention of diplomats, the name Qin Xiu immediately appeared in Xia Jinyuan's mind. A real love rival, and a powerful one at that. He had to be careful. In the past, he said that it didn't matter and that he wasn't worried. It was all bullshit. Qin Xiu wasn't an ordinary diplomat. He was a diplomat who had gone through life and death battles with Little Fox. Moreover, Little Fox had a good impression of him. Such a love rival was enough. If there was one more, he might as well carry Little Fox over his shoulder and register for marriage. Yi Qian also thought of Qin Xiu. His wet eyes shone brightly. He smiled and said, "That's right. It's better to leave this to Qin Xiu. As for me, I'll just do my job." Diplomats could kill people with their words. They used their sharp, and unique speech to shut the mouths of the masses. They also used their diplomatic skills to protect the country's glory. They ruled with civil rights, while the military ruled with military force. Since ancient times, civil and military ruled with military force. It was the same in this era. Yes, leave it to diplomats like Qin Xiu. You're not suitable to enter this circle. Xia Jinyuan openly mentioned his love rival's name. He was on guard, but there was no need to be on guard. He was still very confident in his relationship with Little Fox. They're speeding up. They're trying to increase the distance between the two teams. Q King, should we do the same? Yao Zi, who was sitting at the front of the boat, said fiercely, "We have to make them feel a little scared." Shahrukh ordered his men to speed up and increase the distance between the two teams. Every SFS border guard soldier's arm muscles were as hard as stone. They gritted their teeth and swung their arms quickly. They wanted to land half an hour before the Chinese soldiers and give them a show of strength. Regarding this, Xia Jinyuan was indifferent. We don't have to be on the same level. We just need to maintain a distance of 10 minutes. Remember, we have to maintain a distance of 10 minutes. Qing Yao, calculate how many meters they're rowing per minute and get an average value so that we can keep track of time. Yes, Yi Qian, who had an extraordinary memory and was also quite good at mental calculations, immediately began calculating. When the rest of his comrades heard this, they all looked askance at the captain of their ship, who who had calmly displayed his might. Respect, respect. They didn't overtake them, but maintained a distance of 10 minutes. Ha ha ha. This was the best show of strength. This was to tell Shah Rukh of the SFS border guard that it wasn't that the Chinese soldiers couldn't overtake them. They just needed to maintain their modesty. However, they wouldn't be modest for more than a second. 10 minutes of modesty was 10 minutes of modesty, not even a tenth of a second. Shah Rukh quickly thought of this show of strength. He snapped the timer in his hand and gritted his teeth so hard that his back teeth almost broke. 10 minutes. The Chinese soldiers were only 10 minutes behind them. 10 minutes ago, the SFS border guard soldiers had successfully landed. 10 minutes later, the Chinese soldiers had successfully landed. Chapter 2880. Shalak was so angry that there was a fire burning in his chest. Even his eyes were red and bloodshot. They must be doing this on purpose. They must be doing this on purpose. We can't let them go like this, Shalak. We can't let them go so easily. They can overtake us, but they always keep a distance of 10 minutes. Shalak, are they warning us? Damn it, they're not warning us. They're humiliating us. Several SFS border guards were so angry that their fists were clenched. They couldn't wait to rush over and fight to vent their anger. Staring at the Chinese soldiers who were carrying the rubber boats down, everyone's face was full of unreconciled anger. Shalak grabbed a comrade who was about to take a step forward. Suppressing his anger, he said in a deep voice, "Calm down, whether it's intentional or not. Only we know about this. The other countries don't know." Because the Chinese team is always 10 minutes behind them, they think that the Chinese team deliberately lagged behind by 10 minutes, not even a second more. Using this as an excuse to cause trouble for the Chinese soldiers? Only idiots would do such a thing. They deliberately set the time 10 minutes apart. They must want us to make a fool of ourselves. Okay, my teammates, calm down. Let's all calm down. It's just a warm-up game. The real show will start at 5 o'clock tomorrow. Calm down. Don't fall into the trap of the Chinese soldiers. Shalak clapped his hands, indicating that his team members should stop paying attention to the Chinese soldiers. The more they watched, the angrier they would be, and the more it would affect their judgment in a later game. Go back, set up camp, and study tomorrow's route and tactics. After calming down, Shalak no longer bothered about the 10 minutes lag. Instead, he immediately adjusted his state of mind to prepare for the next battle. The first 3 Western Special Forces soldiers who landed first had already set up wooden stakes, occupied the advantageous camping positions, and began to set up tents. At this time, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon in China, and noon in Estonia, which was 5 hours later than China, happened to be the hottest time of the day when the sun was high in the sky. No matter how high the temperature was, it couldn't immediately dry the wet clothes on the body. On the shore, the wind from the lake blew over, causing even the male soldiers to shiver and have goosebumps all over their bodies. You take care of the tents and leave the pilings to the 3 of us. G3 gestured for Yi Qian to pass him the multifunctional engineering shovel and let Yi Qian do the easier work. She was a female soldier after all, so the male soldiers had to take care of her more or less. Yi Qian passed the engineering shovel over and stomped on the wet military boots. He smiled and said, "I have to pour the water out of the boots first. They're full of water. With every step I take, water gushes out of the laces. Go, go. The grass is still dry. Just wear a pair of clean socks and put your military boots under the sun." G3 looked down at her military boots that were still properly fastened. He could not help but raise his foot. There was a deep smile in his hoarse voice. The first thing to do when you rest is to take off your shoes for some fresh air. He was barefooted, and Yi Qian saw that the soles of his feet were white and wrinkled from the water. It was the same when he took off his military boots. Creases appeared on the soles and toes of his feet. "Get some fresh air first, then put on your socks." Xia Jinyuan's low voice came from behind. Yi Qian, who was about to put on his socks, turned his head and smiled. "You're all barefooted, but I'm not used to barefooted." Chapter 2881. She wasn't shy. She was just not used to it. Xia Jinyuan walked over and squatted in front of Yi Qian. He lowered his gaze and looked at Yi Qian's bare feet. Then, he stretched out a finger and gently poked Yi Qian's fair and tender feet. There was a teasing smile in his eyes. "You still look good, not ugly." Women and men were different. Their hands and feet were delicate. Yi Qian's hands and feet were small and soft. Her fingers were as sharp as scallions, slender and long. They felt soft and boneless when held in his hand. However, due to years of training, there were calluses between his palm and fingers that held the gun. The tips of her feet were pink and moist, like pink seashells, small and delicate. Xia Jinyuan had secretly measured Yi Qian's feet with his own palm and found that they were not even as long as his palm. They were small and fleshy, extremely beautiful, and he couldn't help but want to touch them. At this moment, her delicate feet, which had a light pink luster like a pearl, were white and wrinkled after being soaked in the lake water. He couldn't help but think of a steamed bun soaked in water and wanted to laugh. Yi Qian, who was not used to being barefooted, was not shy about being barefooted. However, when a man kept staring at her feet and even poking her feet with a finger, she felt a little embarrassed. Her ears were slightly flushed. She curled her delicate toes and said to the man who was squatting in front of her, "Go do your own things. Don't squat in front of me. I have something to talk to you about." Xia Jinyuan saw that Yi Qian was a little embarrassed, so he quickly retracted his gaze. He kept staring at her feet. He didn't want her to think that he had some kind of special fetish. He took out the map he got at the airport from his combat vest. "Tomorrow, we will be fighting against the United States and Germany. There will be border countries and Italy participating in the battle. Take a look at the route here and memorize it. Later, there will be a map for tomorrow's march for us. You have to memorize it as well." When they got down to business, Yi Qian swept away the slight embarrassment in his heart. He took the map and glanced at it. "I've already memorized everything. Now I can consolidate it for a while." "All right, you should memorize the overall map again. When you get the battle map, you can combine the two and memorize it again. You can rest for a while now. After the tent is set up, you can come in and change your clothes. I will stand guard for you." It was 12:30 in the afternoon in Estonia, and the competition would start at 5 o'clock in the morning the next day. Today's wet combat uniform could be taken off and dried on top of the tent. There was no need to use body heat to dry the clothes. The tents were set up very quickly. Yi Qian was the first to enter the tent to change his clothes. Only then did the male soldiers enter the tent to change their clothes. For the rest of the afternoon, the Chinese soldiers did not come out of their tents. The special forces of the other countries did not come out of their tents either. When the sky was about to turn dark, the Chinese soldiers came out of their tents when they heard footsteps outside. Before the official competition, the soldiers of the other countries started to interact in twos and threes. The Chinese soldiers were closer to the fighting nations, and they also interacted with the special forces of the other Western countries. On the other hand, they did not interact much with the SFS Border Defense Force, which was also from Asia. The SFS Border Defense Force interacted more with the United States and Great Britain's Western European countries. In Asia, only the Chinese and the border countries were participating. The lack of interaction between the special forces of the two countries showed that the atmosphere was not harmonious. As night fell, the special forces of the other countries returned to their own tents. They ate portable fast food while exchanging tactics. At 7 o'clock in the evening, the specific rules for tomorrow's competition were sent to all the tents in the form of paper documents. Tomorrow, the Chinese soldiers would begin the first round of the competition against the United States and Germany, the two Western countries. Chapter 2882. The documents arrived at the tent of the Chinese soldiers. The 8 people who had finished their meals sat cross-legged together, turned on the flashlight sticks, spread out the map, and began to make the most detailed battle arrangements. The difficulty of the competition could be seen from the words on the documents. In the competition between China, the United States, and Germany, the first event was a 30-kilometer cross-country run, and the second event was a marksmanship test. The difficulty of the first event was a 10-kilometer cross-country run, followed by the first round of pistol shooting. Then, it was a 10-kilometer cross-country run, followed by a running rifle shooting. Finally, It was a 10-kilometer sprint, followed by sniper rifle shooting. Xia Jinyuan, who was sitting in the middle, put away his usual mischievous smile. He was like a sharp sword that had been unsheathed, and his eyes were sharp enough to cut through everything. A 15-kilometer sprint. There are Estonian elite troops serving as hypothetical enemies. The exact number is unknown. Here, the 8 of us will be divided into 2 groups. Each group of 4 will support the front and back. In order to ensure that the 2 groups arrive at the same shooting point, the distance between the 2 groups must not be too far, lest the formation gets separated. Qing Niao, check the map. See if tomorrow's 38-kilometer sprint will pass through the swamp. He looked up, and his sharp and cold gaze fell on Yi Qian's face. At this time, she was not his girlfriend, and he was not her boyfriend. The 2 of them were in a superior and subordinate relationship. One of them gave orders, and the other had to follow orders unconditionally. Yi Qian immediately opened the entire map and combined it with the battle map for tomorrow. The pencil in his hand slowly drew on the complicated map, and finally he looked up at Xia Jinyuan. No, we are still 10 kilometers away from the swamp. But tomorrow we need to cross the rope bridge and bury the mines. The first day is very difficult, and it will get harder as we go. This was natural, or else it would not be called IKA assault. Tomorrow's cross-country assault will be the main event, and the technical assessment will be secondary. Remember, the distance between the 2 groups must not be too far. Once the formation gets separated, we will be behind in entering the first control station, which will affect the rest of the competition. Remember, all participants must arrive at the first control station within the specified time, no later than 5 minutes. Do you remember? His voice was cold and full of murderous intent. Yi Qian couldn't help but feel a chill in his heart. He straightened his back even more. At this moment, Xia Jinyuan was the Q King. He was completely isolated from the real Xia Jinyuan and had become the Q King on a mission. The first round of shooting for the pistol team will be led by Demon King. The first team members are Xia Jinyuan, then arranged the pistol, rifle, and sniper shooting teams for the next day in batches so that they could perform in an orderly manner and avoid any mishaps before the competition. 30 kilometers of cross-country was actually very simple. It wasn't even a problem for the specially trained special forces. The difficulty lay in the fact that there were pursuers and encirclement. After that, they still had to complete the shooting at the designated point. Halfway through the shooting, they still had to complete the shooting while running. That was the most difficult part. After a long cross-country run, all the muscles in the body were extremely tense. Shooting was closely related to muscle memory, so must have formed muscle memory. As soon as they held the gun in their hands, they could immediately shoot accurately. But now that their muscles were tense from running, their breathing could not calm down in a short time. At this time, even if their muscles had formed muscle memory, it was impossible to immediately complete the shooting accurately. Chapter 2883. From this, it could be seen that IKA assault was very likely to challenge the technical standards of the Special Forces. When Yi Qian saw these rules, even with her accurate marksmanship, she could not guarantee that she would be able to complete 5 accurate shots. Don't put too much pressure on yourselves. We didn't come here with the determination to win, but with the attitude of learning. Learn well, learn in secret, understand the advantages of the special forces of Western countries, and bring the good ones back to China to carry forward. Our important task is to learn and make sure that we don't lose too badly. Xia Jinyuan had a lot of confidence in the abilities of his comrades, and he believed that his comrades were capable enough to win. Unfortunately, the Chinese soldiers who had just arrived did not need to win beautifully. Winning beautifully would go against the development of the country, and being too high profile would attract more attention. The military strength of China was currently developing in secret, and there was no need for them to be as high profile as the U.S. If they were too high profile and did not have the corresponding ability to bear the consequences of being high profile, then even a dragon would have to be well behaved. The Special Forces soldiers who came to participate in the competition all knew what kind of mission they were responsible for. Hearing this, they all nodded cautiously, indicating that they understood in their hearts that there would be no mistakes. It was already late at night, and the Special Forces soldiers of various countries in the various tents were already preparing to turn off the lights and go to sleep. Yichien opened her sleeping bag and fell asleep without even taking off her combat uniform. She only took off the military boots that had been dried during the day. At 2 o'clock in the morning in the eastern forest of Estonia, which had a maritime climate, a cold rain suddenly fell. The bean-sized raindrops hit the tent loudly, seriously affecting the sleep of every Special Forces soldier. Yichien opened her eyes and stared at the tent for at least 5 minutes. Listening to the pitter-patter of the rain, she forced herself to fall asleep. "Are you awake?" Xia Jinyuan's sleepy voice came from beside her. Yichien, who had forced herself to close her eyes, suddenly opened her eyes and turned her head to look to her left. "Why are you sleeping next to me?" Before falling asleep, she clearly remembered that her brother slept on her left side, and her right side was the edge of the tent. Since when did Captain Xia sleep beside him? Xia Jinyuan, who had slept for several hours, stretched his hand out of the warm sleeping bag. Then, he flicked Yichien's forehead with his slender fingers and chuckled. "Are you that surprised that I'm sleeping next to you?" Luckily, I was surprised that I didn't wake up. Yichien rubbed his eyes. After being interrupted by him, even the sleepy-head bug was gone. It was 2 o'clock in the morning, and the temperature in the eastern forest was quite low. It was only 8 degrees Celsius. Fortunately, the tents were tight enough to block out the wind and rain, and there was a group of masculine male soldiers all around, so the temperature inside the tents was slightly higher than outside. Yichien, who was no longer sleepy, reached out to rub her forehead. She frowned and said, "Keep your distance. Don't touch me." Xia Jinyuan chuckled. "I was sleeping outside, but the Devil King woke me up around midnight. He said that you were calling my name in your dreams, so he had no choice but to let me sleep here. Now you're blaming me for touching you. Why don't you say that you were thinking of me coming over to get close to you in your dreams?" Yichien was dumbfounded. Her last trace of sleepiness flew away. Her eyes widened, and under the dim light of the flashlight, she whispered in disbelief, "How is that possible? I wasn't dreaming at all. If it wasn't raining outside, I would have slept until 4:30. Chapter 2884. The operation started at 5 in the morning, so it was considered late for her to wake up at 4:30. She only said that she had a good sleep and did not dream, so it was impossible for her to call out Xia Jinyuan's name in her dreams. That was indeed the case. Otherwise, why would Li Jinyan give up his position to a wild wolf that constantly wanted to snatch his sister away? Xia Jinyuan smiled until his eyes had a dim light, but his gaze was as gentle as the warm sun that had just risen in winter. Who knows? The devil said it himself. Could it be false? If it was her brother who said it himself, then it couldn't be false. Yichien rubbed her temples helplessly. "I really didn't dream. I don't know why I called out your name, but I'm sure I slept very well. Now that I've woken up, I'm so sleepy that I don't want to sleep anymore." She had called out Captain Xia's name in her dream, and then her brother had heard it. In the end, she had even let Captain Xia sleep next to her. Yi Jian felt very embarrassed. It was as if she had done something shameful and her brother had caught her red-handed. Should she consider wearing a mask to sleep for the next few days? She didn't want her brother to hear her call out Captain Xia's name in her dreams again. Xia Jinyuan, who was also not sleepy, closed his eyes and rested comfortably. He answered her slowly, "What you think about in the day, you dream about it at night. I didn't expect you to miss me so much even though I'm right beside you during the day. You even call out my name in your dreams. Not bad, I like it." 2 days ago, during the training, G3 and the others said that I called out your name in my dreams. Our hearts are connected, and we even dream of each other in our dreams. In order to prevent their conversation from being overheard by their comrades, Xia Jinyuan consciously moved his sleeping bag so that their heads were facing each other. He spoke at a distance where only the two of them could hear. He did this to take care of Yi Qian's thin skin. But since they were talking in private, Yi Qian still blushed at his words. She used her head to lightly bump against his head and turned around. The back of her head was facing the man who was grinning from ear to ear and couldn't suppress it for a long time. Let's sleep a little longer. It's only 10 past 2. I'll wake up at 4. Leaning against each other, Xia Jinyuan, whose cold expression had softened, gently exhaled a breath of hot air. Leaning against each other shoulder to shoulder, head to head, the soft affection filled his chest. It was the fortune of a lifetime to have someone like her by his side. Yi Qian also closed his eyes. It was still early, so he should sleep a little longer. Pressing against his head, Yi Qian could not help but gently move his head like a puppy that had not been weaned off milk, looking for the safest embrace in its owner's arms. She liked to rely on him like this. She liked it as much as he liked it. Li Jinyan, who was lying in Xia Jinyuan's original position, did not seem to have been woken up by the rain. His cold, chiseled features were relaxed, and he was in a deep sleep. At 4 o'clock, the Chinese soldiers woke up almost at the same time. They reacted quickly and immediately cleaned up their equipment. After cleaning up their equipment, they began to wash up. At 4:40 p.m., the special forces of the 12 countries were assembled. At 4:50 p.m., Xia Jinyuan led the Chinese soldiers to shake hands with the American and German soldiers. The special forces of the Chinese, American, and German teams were all assembled. At the same time, the commander-in-chief of the Estonian National Defense Force began a short 5-minute speech. The general idea was that they had completed a day and a night's mission in the forest, and they had received the same amount of rest at night. Next up, it would be a fair and just competition. The special forces of each country would show their skills and fight for the glory of their country. Chapter 2885. General Haywill walked directly to the special forces of his country and shook hands with each of them. After he was done, he stood in front and lifted his chin slightly. His voice was full of confidence and pride as he said, "I believe that every soldier in our country only has one goal, and that is to work hard for the best. Comrades, what follows next is your time, your battle, and your battlefield. And I am waiting for the return of my warriors. Tell me, my warriors, do you have the confidence to win this battle? Answer me with yes or a no. Yes, yes, yes." Their loud and clear voices carried an aura that could topple mountains and overturn seas. That kind of confidence could ruthlessly trample all difficulties under their feet. Even if there were thorns and thorns in front of them, they would bravely and fearlessly walk on and win the final victory. The generals sent by the Germans also encouraged their country's participating soldiers, telling them that they would always be the elites, the invincible generals. On the contrary, the Chinese side's aura was much weaker before the competition. At least in the eyes of the generals in the audience, the Chinese side had no aura to speak of. They did not even make a speech before the competition. I think the Chinese side has been shocked by the momentum of the Americans and Germans. An Asian country wanting to compete with a developed country was a wrong decision from the beginning. They shouldn't have come. They should have waited a few years. A few years later, even if they lose, I don't think they will lose too badly. It hasn't started yet. We shouldn't be like this. I don't think highly of the Chinese soldiers. After all, they were the 5th to come ashore last night. They still have a certain level of strength. I hope Lady Luck will favor them. I wish them good luck. The discussions of the generals in the observation group reached their ears. The Chinese soldiers turned a deaf ear to them. They checked the loading of their pistols and rifles for the last time, made sure that all their equipment was correct, and waited for the arrival of 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the order was given. The special forces of each country headed toward their respective finishing points. The special forces of China, America, and Germany all had the same finishing point. The signal guns sounded, and the special forces of the three sides were like cheetahs released from their cages, ferociously heading toward the finishing point. They really underestimated us, Q King. How long do we have to endure before we can hold our heads high? There's no need for others to see us being proud and elated. We have to make it so that others can't vent their anger. Xia Jinyuan raised his eyebrows and coldly replied to Big Eel, The real way to feel proud is not to win on the surface, but to make the other party feel fearful and helpless. That is the real way to feel proud. Rushing out of the starting point, the 8 special forces jumped over the ravine and passed through the strange rocks, heading towards the finish line fearlessly. 10 kilometers away, the technical course pistol shooting was waiting for them. Go! The Special Forces soldier from the United States held the rifle in his arms and jumped down from a high rock. Their commander was the first to jump down and waited for his team members to arrive. Their explosive power was quite strong. Every time they leapt into the air, their strong bodies would straighten, and their extraordinary strength would allow them to land steadily and perfectly. Forest ahead, cover the front and back. G3, Sparrowhawk, Scout. Big Eel, Devil, bring up the rear. The rest of you break out. Hurry! As they approached the forest, Xia Jinyuan, whose eyes were as cold as a beast's, gave the order through the headset. Chapter 2886. The imaginary enemies that surrounded the Chinese soldiers were all Estonian soldiers. From a moment the signal gun was fired, the Estonian soldiers began to surround and block the participating special forces from other countries. They were not elites, but they had the advantage of numbers. When they surrounded the Chinese soldiers, they surrounded them in groups one after another. They did not even let go of the cracks in the rocks. The Estonian soldiers were familiar with this forest. Even if the environment was bad and the terrain was complicated, it was still a familiar place to them. For the European countries that had participated in the IKA assault team several times, this forest was not unfamiliar to them. Compared to the Chinese team, which was participating for the first time, they had a geographical advantage. The terrain was unfamiliar, the environment was bad, the competition was complicated, and the rules were cruel. These were the facts that the Chinese soldiers had to face. Every competition was a challenge, waiting for the Chinese soldiers to defeat them. The encirclement was not a direct battle. Instead, it was an encirclement that locked the special forces of each country in so that they would not be able to participate in the next competition on time. However, this rule was not explained in detail. It was based on the observation of the participating members and commanders of each country. Cruel and flexible rules were often the best way to delay time. In the first round of the encirclement, the Chinese soldiers performed very quickly. They were not directly blocked and surrounded. They rushed out of the encirclement at lightning speed. Even the corners of their clothes were not touched. In the blink of an eye, they rushed out of the line of sight of the Estonian soldiers. The competition had just begun. They could not be surrounded in the first round because of modesty. That would be too embarrassing. They would be a disgrace to their country. Because of their learning, they had to maintain their usual modesty and prudence. They had to keep a low profile. Although it was a tactic, they could not lose face because of it. The Chinese Special Forces always kept this in mind. They would never do anything inappropriate that would bring shame to their country. The commander-in-chief of the Estonian National Defense Force, who was watching the Chinese soldiers, saw this and unconsciously touched the pistol at his waist. The Chinese soldiers were indeed capable. They were not as bad as General Haywill had said. However, the competition had just begun. Whether the Chinese soldiers could maintain the middle score depended on their performance. They had warmed up yesterday and had a good rest at night. It was normal for them to perform well in the first round. Not only did the Chinese soldiers rush out of the encirclement, but the other 11 countries also did the same. The American team was even faster than the Estonian team. They had already rushed out of the encirclement without the Estonian soldiers noticing. Well done! An American senior colonel who accompanied General Haywill could not help but secretly cheer for his country's soldiers. General Haywill heard this and smiled at the senior colonel. If you don't calm down, I'm worried that you will fall off the mountain bike. You're right. I really should control my emotions. Otherwise, some people will think that we don't know how to restrain ourselves. Even though I think that we don't need to restrain ourselves, for the sake of the weak, I'll restrain myself a little. The senior colonel nodded in a serious manner as he tugged at the hem of his military uniform. He was saying that he needed to tone down, but his chest was puffed out even more. Chapter 2887. As a world superpower, the United States was at the forefront in all aspects. Their military strength was one of the best, and they had the confidence to start a war. They never thought that they needed to restrain their actions. The ones who needed to restrain their actions were always weak countries that were afraid of starting a war. Their country did not need to restrain themselves. The senior colonel's words made General Haywill's smile widen. There's nothing wrong with restraining ourselves. Everyone knows the strength of our contestants. They didn't lose any of the 10 penalty slips in the last competition. The second place, Estonia, lost 2 of their own contestants. Our strength is not something those weak countries can compare to. After that, General Haywill and the senior colonel looked at each other and smiled. Their eyes were filled with unbreakable confidence. An hour had passed, and the Chinese contestants were still 2 kilometers away from the first 10 kilometers. Now, they only needed to break through this round of encirclement to reach the shooting range. Yi Qian crouched under a brown moss-covered rock that protruded from the surface of the mountain. It was just big enough for her to hide. She used her binoculars to observe the front. They've sent out soldiers from the National Defense Forces and civil guards. They're slightly weaker than us in terms of raw strength. Team 1 will break through the encirclement from the front. Team 2, observe the encirclement from the back. Xia Jinyuan's deep voice came through the earpiece. Every word was clear and cold. Team 2, support Team 1 after you break through the encirclement. Roger, Roger, Roger. Yi Qian pressed down on her earpiece and made a hand gesture behind her. 3 figures appeared from the bushes. Team 1 broke through the encirclement from the front, while Team 2 observed the encirclement from the back. 3 o'clock to the left. Make way. 10 o'clock to the right. Make way. 3 o'clock to the front. Make way. As Team 2 observed the encirclement from the back, Team 1 broke through the encirclement from the front. Not only did they avoid the hidden Estonian soldiers, but they also attracted the Estonian soldiers who were searching around. This ensured that Team 2 could successfully break through the encirclement from the back. Be careful, everyone. Cover the penalty slips tightly. 1 point will be deducted for every penalty slip you collect. 10 penalty slips will be deducted, and you'll be sacrificed. Remind a group of comrades who are breaking through from the front and break through with the big eel. Yi Qian and Li Jinyan were the first to break out of the encirclement. They had not completely entered the forest yet. They were surrounded by shrubs, short grass, and rocks covered with a layer of brown moss. They were surrounded by imaginary enemies. If they were not careful, they would be hunted down by the imaginary enemies. In front of them was the blockade line that the Chinese team members had to break through. If they went around it, their points would be invalid and they would also be deducted. Xia Jinyuan led a group of players to break out of the encirclement. However, it was not the kind of head-on confrontation where they would stand out and shout, "Come at me." Instead, it was a head-on confrontation where the imaginary enemy could see them and quickly avoid them. With the help of Team 2, Xia Jinyuan not only led the team to quickly evade, but also covered for Team 2 to evade covertly. The 2 teams cooperated seamlessly, one in the open and one in the dark. Over here. Follow them closely. Quick. There's more here, guys. They're heading this way. Scatter and pursue. Block the front and chase after me from behind. Take out the slips of paper from their pockets. The Chinese team members were soldiers from the Estonian National Defense Army. The referee who recorded the score was waiting for the Chinese team to arrive at the blockade line. Chapter 2888. The referee could hear the loud roars of the National Defense Army soldiers not far away. The referee, who was holding the scorecard, stared at the scoreboard in his hand and stared straight ahead. Looking past the short grass and the rocks in the grass, the referee saw 2 figures appear first. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 Chinese soldiers had appeared. They were holding rifles in their hands and sprinting towards the perimeter of the blockade. The seconds on the timer changed very quickly from 1 to 0, and then from 0 to 1. It kept changing, the seconds kept changing, and the points kept changing. At this point, more than an hour and 10 minutes had passed since the start of the competition, and the allotted time was an hour and a half. The referee outside the blockade saw the figures of the 4 Chinese soldiers flash past in front of him, while 3 National Defense Army soldiers chased after them. However, he did not notice the 4 hidden Chinese soldiers lying prone not far away. The American contestants have broken through the blockade and are preparing to shoot with their pistols. The latest news from the front came through the referee's earpiece. Just like in previous years, the American contestants were still the ones who held on to first place. The American contestants were still as good as ever, and the Chinese contestants who had broken through the blockade were not bad either. After avoiding the 3 National Defense Army soldiers, the 4 Chinese soldiers were sprinting towards him. Now, what are they trying to do? The referee, who was holding the timer, widened his eyes. He saw the 4 Chinese contestants who had rushed out turn back. What were they trying to do? The referee's earpiece sounded again. The Estonian contestants had broken through the blockade and were preparing to shoot with their pistols. However, the 4 Chinese contestants who had rushed out of the blockade had turned back. The referee saw the 3 National Defense Army soldiers chasing after 2 Chinese soldiers. Meanwhile, the other 2 Chinese soldiers had split up for some reason, leaving their 2 comrades completely exposed. The contestants were all carrying 35 kilograms of equipment. Compared to the National Defense Army soldiers who were lightly armed, they were undoubtedly the weaker ones. It would be very difficult for the 2 Chinese soldiers who were completely exposed to avoid the pursuit of the 3 National Defense Army soldiers. As long as they were caught by the imaginary enemy, they would have to hand over a penalty slip. By the time all 10 penalty slips were handed over, they would be considered sacrificed. Could it be that the 2 Chinese soldiers who were completely exposed were doing this on purpose? The referee stared at the timer for a while and then looked up ahead. He was trying to guess the tactics of the Chinese soldiers. The ones who had been completely exposed were Xia Jinyuan and G3. The 2 of them were famous for their endurance in the Snowfield Brigade. Even though they were carrying 35 kilograms of equipment, when the 3 imaginary enemies rushed over, the 2 of them immediately split up and gave the chance to escape to young Sparrow Hawk and T6. The 8 of them were like a net with Xia Jinyuan at the center of the net, maintaining a certain distance from each other, and broke through the encirclement of dozens of imaginary enemies. Under Yi Yiqian's command, the 8's directions, and headed to the edge of the blockade. Yi Jian memorized the entire battle route map in her mind. She was the most suitable person to lead the way. There was no need to worry about taking detours or delaying time. She was a hidden member of Team 2. She had rushed out of the blockade long ago without even the referee noticing. The 4 members of the Chinese team were well hidden, waiting for the 4 members of Team 1 to gather. Very soon, young Sparrow Hawk and the T6 combatants successfully broke through the blockade. The referee also noticed them, but what puzzled him was that the 2 Chinese soldiers did not run over immediately. Instead, they hid themselves again. Chapter 2889. What are they trying to do? I can't guess what they're thinking at all. The referee was talking to the military officials beside him. He was not the only one waiting outside the blockade line. There were several other military officials waiting as well. I can't see through them either. Maybe they're a little panicked? That's why they're running around? One of the military officials replied uncertainly. It's possible. Countries participating for the first time will more or less panic. The Chinese soldiers should be the same. They don't have much time left. In order to avoid our national defense soldiers, they delayed their arrival at the control station. God, this is a misguided strategy. The Chinese soldiers will lose more than 10 times their points. Under normal circumstances, once one was surrounded by imaginary enemies and had no place to escape, the best way was to obediently surrender and take out a penalty slip so that they could arrive at the control station on time. However, the Chinese soldiers were stalling for time because they did not want to pay the penalty slip. The generals of the various countries could not help but shake their heads regretfully. A failed strategy will bring about the worst consequences for them. They shouldn't do this. There's not much time left. The contestants from the 4 countries have finished shooting with their pistols and entered the next 10 kilometers. The Chinese soldiers are still in the next 10 kilometers. I already have a feeling that they will lose more than 10 times their points. With more than 10 times their points deducted, they will be at the bottom of the first round. It will be almost impossible for them to shorten their points in time. Up until now, there had not been a single country that had been able to successfully reverse their results and obtain a good ranking. Even General Kallisler, who had high hopes for the Chinese soldiers, could not help but clench his fists. The relationship between his country and the Chinese had become closer in the past 2 years. The 2 countries had the same goal. In addition, the 2 countries had always been friendly. In the Chechen War in the 90s, the relationship between the 2 countries had become even more stable. Due to the friendly diplomatic relations between the 2 countries, he also hoped that the Chinese side, which was participating for the first time, could obtain a good result. But now, General Kallisler looked at the time. It was very tight. If they did not act now, the Chinese soldiers might really delay their arrival at the control station. Although General Kallisler was worried, he did not think of reminding the Chinese side. This was a competition where there were winners and losers. Even if the 2 countries had a friendly diplomatic relationship, he could not remind the Chinese soldiers who were competing with his country. Friendship was friendship, competition was competition. If they lost, they had to admit it. What they didn't know was that the commander of the Chinese team, Xia Jinyuan, was lying under a rock with a pen and a notebook in his hand. He was scribbling furiously. He had already said that he was here to learn. Now that he saw the strengths of another country, he had to remember them. I've already seen the referee. How much longer do you guys need to rush out? Li Jingyan, who had rushed out of the blockade and was hiding behind a rock, asked the 2 members of Team 1 who had yet to come out. There's no need to play this game of cat and mouse for too long. There's not much time left. Soon, give us a breather. The Great Mermaid leaned against the rock and panted heavily. Demon King, we have to switch to a frontal assault. 35 kilograms of equipment can run and jump at the same time. It can really crush people to death. Xia Jinyuan waited for him to finish before saying, the Great Mermaid fell and hit her chin. Stop the bleeding yourself while I write something. It's enough time. I'll keep an eye on him. Li Jingyan, whose eyes were a little gloomy, raised his head and looked ahead. The corners of his mouth tightened a little. Okay, you're not far from us. I can hear you directly. Chapter 2890. It was only the first day, and they were already injured. This was not good news. Knowing that their comrade was injured, everyone felt a little depressed. During training, it was not that they had not carried 35 kilograms of equipment on their backs before. However, the terrain of the eastern forest was extremely complicated. Furthermore, it had rained last night, and they were not familiar with the terrain. Sometimes, when they used too much force, they would be ambushed by small rocks hidden in the bushes, causing them to slip and fall. This was the case for the Great Mermaid. It looked like a flat patch of short grass, but she did not expect to be ambushed the moment she jumped down. She fell and almost bit off her tongue. She did not need Xia Jinyuan's help for her chin injury. She deftly opened the sanitary bag and quickly treated the wound. The wound was a little deep, and the skin and flesh were rolling out. The Great Mermaid did not ask for Xia Jinyuan's help during the entire process of disinfecting and wrapping up the gauze. She finished the treatment by herself. The German team members arrived at the pistol shooting competition venue in 1 hour and 16 minutes. At this time, the 8 American team members had already entered the last round of pistol shooting. The Chinese team members had yet to arrive. There were only 13 minutes left until the allotted time. 2 other countries had already entered the shooting competition. They only needed to complete 2 rounds before the pistol shooting competition ended. Xia Jinyuan stuffed the pen and notebook into his bag, wrapped the gauze around the Great Mermaid's chin with medical tape, and rushed out of the blockade line with the Great Mermaid. 1 hour and 23 minutes later, the observation team finally saw the figures of the Chinese team members. At this time, 6 countries had already completed their pistol shooting and were heading for the next 10 kilometers. Kallisler looked at the time. 7 minutes. There were only 7 minutes left. If all 8 team members used continuous shooting to complete their pistol shooting, they would be able to finish within 5 minutes without being penalized. Next, they would speed up their march and increase the time they had spent in the first round. They would not have to worry about not being able to reach the control station within the allotted time. Seeing the late Chinese team members, General Haywell let out a long sigh of relief. He seemed happy, but also sighed. Just as he was about to turn his head to communicate with General Callisler, who was 2 other countries' generals, praised, the Chinese team members' performance is praiseworthy. Although they are late, they did not exceed the allotted time. Also, none of them handed in any penalty slips. They still have 10 penalty slips in their pockets. For a country that is participating for the first time, this is quite good. His words suppressed the mockery that was about to rush out of General Haywell's mouth. One of their own country's contestants was successfully surrounded by the Estonian National Defense Force soldiers, and he was given a penalty. Although the Chinese side was slow, they did not hand in a single penalty, which showed that their tactics were very stable. Even so, the military officials on the field and the other country's generals in the observation team, when they were in the next 10 kilometers, especially since the American team had already entered the next 10-kilometer off-road spot, the calmness of the Chinese team members was no longer outstanding. Continuous shooting, Xia Jinyuan. As Xia Jinyuan spoke, the Chinese team members, who were carrying 35 kilograms of equipment, stood in a row and pulled out their pistols from their holsters at the same time. Ka. The bullets were loaded. Yi Jian stood at the front. She had already raised her pistol and looked straight ahead. Her heart was as calm as water as she aimed at the bull's eye. As the referee blew the whistle, 5 bullets were fired consecutively. Chapter 2891. The commander-in-chief of the Estonian Defense Forces, who was watching the competition, received the latest news. The referee said through his headset, the Chinese female soldier did not realize that her pistol cartridge did not match the barrel. She has already lost 2 points. Once the cartridge jams, she will lose another 2 points if she does not replace the cartridge in time. If she does not complete the shooting within the specified time, she will lose 6 points. The commander-in-chief of the Estonian Defense Forces received the latest news. Similarly, the generals of the observer group who were present also received the latest news. At the same time, they all gasped at the harsh and flexible rules of this competition. The other countries' special forces who had completed the shooting did not have such problems, but the Chinese special forces who were participating for the first time had encountered it. It was really unfortunate. The corners of General Haywell's mouth slowly curled up. This was really good news that made people feel happy. He raised his hand to look at the time. Word or few? Well done. Pistol cartridge jams, replacement of the cartridge, replacement of the cartridge, reassembly of the cartridge, replacement of the cartridge, completion of the shooting. Even if each step was 1 minute, the Chinese female soldier who did not realize the severity of the problem would still need 6 minutes to complete the 6 steps. Now, there were only 3 minutes left to the 1.5 hour. With half of the time missing, the Chinese female soldier was about to lose 10 points. What a delightful piece of news. Even this damned drizzling weather has become very cute. Look, the scenery in the distance is really beautiful. The commander-in-chief of the Estonian Defense Forces was also confused by the rules. He also did not know that the competition could be like this. But why was it only for Chinese soldiers? May I ask the judges and military officers, is this soft technical rule only for the Chinese team, or is it the same for the other teams? He asked very seriously. IKA Assault was a fair and just competition. The rules were to treat all the teams equally. There could not be a rule that only targeted one country. That would not be a rule, but a deliberate attempt to make things difficult. The referees gave the most authoritative answer. It's not just the Chinese team members. Every country's team members will encounter the same problem. In this pistol shooting competition, only the Chinese team and the nation of all islands will have the wrong match of bullets. In the following rifle and sniper rifle competitions, there will be mistakes in all countries, but the Chinese team will not have the same mistake. The referee's authoritative answer made the generals in the observation group feel their hearts sink. The pistols, rifles, and sniper rifles issued in the match could all be replaced with different holsters and bullet calibers. If they were not careful, they would be hit like the female soldier on the Chinese side. Let's see if their contestants can find out. If only they would find out. If only they would find out. When the generals of the Kingdom of 10,000 Islands heard that their country would be in the same situation, their hearts were in their throats. This was because their country's contestants had rushed to the shooting range at almost the same time as the Chinese team. Moreover, they also didn't find that the bullets didn't match their holsters when they were cleaning their equipment. In other words, they were now the same as the Chinese team. They had lost 2 points. The entire observer group was so quiet that only the sound of breathing could be heard. Even the arrogant General Haywill was silent. In the previous IKA assault competition, there was no such thing as a mismatch between the bullet and the holster. Would the contestants from their country be able to discover it? Chapter 2892. At this point, even General Haywill, who had always been confident in his country's contestants, was a little uncertain. Everyone was staring at the Chinese female contestants and the male contestants from the nation of all islands. Fire! The military officer from the nation of all islands raised the flag high and waved it down. The contestant from a nation of all islands began to shoot. Like the Chinese team, they used continuous shooting to buy time. What? The male contestant from a nation of all islands stared at the jammed pistol in his hand. He was a little confused. He turned his head and said to the military officer beside him, "There's a problem with my pistol. The bullet is jammed. I need to change to a new pistol." He spoke in his native language, not English. He was so anxious that he blurted out his native language. The military officer from Estonia shook his head, indicating that he didn't understand what he was saying. The general from a nation of all islands saw his country's contestant gesticulating in English. He said anxiously, "There's a problem with my pistol. This is a problematic pistol. Why didn't you check it properly before handing it in? Your carelessness will affect my competition." He was so anxious that he almost roared out loud. He roared until the veins on his neck bulged. "You checked your own equipment. Why didn't you discover the problem in advance?" The military officer replied coldly. He looked at the anxious male contestant coldly. "That's your problem. You have to find your own reason first, not question others." When Yi Qian shot the first bullet, his sharp eyes suddenly darkened. "There's a problem with my gun. The first bullet couldn't be fired at all. It was jammed." Yi Qian's pupils constricted as if he had thought of something important. This was a pistol with a barrel that didn't match the bullet. Grizzly Winchester Magnum pistol using .45 Winchester Magnum. It was a large-caliber automatic pistol that was invented in 1980 and produced in the same year. It had 8-inch and 10-inch barrels. Its appearance was completely modeled after the design of the Colt M1911A1. The biggest difference was that it could be fine-tuned and use a unique bullet. A 0.45-inch ACP cartridge should hold a 0.357-inch bullet, but she loaded a 0.44-inch Magnum cartridge. Previously, she had checked the handguns to see if there were any problems, but she had missed a step. It was a step that she would usually not overlook. But this time, she believed that since the handguns were issued uniformly, there would not be any problems with the wrong bullets. Therefore, she did not check if the bullet matched the barrel. This was a mistake, and it was very likely that she had lost points. IKA Assault is the most intense, toughest, harshest, and most flexible special forces competition in the world. You'll never be able to imagine what the next level of difficulty will be. What Xiao Jinyuan said on the plane before the battle flashed through his mind. After discovering the problem, Yi Qian didn't panic. After reporting that there was a problem with his pistol, he immediately took out a magazine from his combat vest and removed the faulty magazine at the same time. Xiao Jinyuan's calm voice came through the earpiece. "Your shooting speed is 0.003 seconds faster than ours. I'll give you 10 seconds to change the magazine. 10 seconds to change the magazine and finish shooting." Yi Qian could definitely catch up with his teammates' shooting speed. Chapter 2893. The most important thing now was to remove the jam bullet, change the parts, change the holster, reassemble the gun, and then change the magazine. When she reported to her comrades that there was a problem with her pistol, she had already removed the old magazine. Then, with a push of her thumb into the old magazine, a bullet popped out. That's right, her magazine was filled with 44-inch Magnum bullets. Understood. When she heard Xia Jinyuan tell her that she had 10 seconds to change the magazine, Yi Qian replied calmly, with a serious expression. Compared to the anxious male soldiers of the island of 10,000 nations, she was unbelievably calm. Not to mention cold sweat, there wasn't even a trace of panic on her face. Even the referees and military officials of the other countries around her were amazed. They focused all their attention on this Chinese female soldier, watching her from the moment she discovered the problem to the moment she started to solve it. The whole process was so orderly that those who did not know the situation would not know that this Chinese female soldier was facing a major problem that would affect the ranking of the entire Chinese team, as well as her personal points deduction. Single-point shooting. Xia Jinyuan didn't disturb Yi Qian. At a time like this, Yi Qian could only rely on herself. Other than that, she had no one else to rely on, not even her comrades. They couldn't help even if they wanted to. The only thing that could help Yi Qian was that they immediately switched from continuous shooting to single-point shooting. This way, Yi Qian would have enough time to catch up with him. When Yi Qian heard his new order, her beautiful face, which was covered in paint, became even calmer. Don't panic, Yi Qian, you can do it. Your comrades are waiting for you. They will support you with their own actions. Don't panic. She held the ejected bullet tightly in her hand and reloaded the old magazine back into the combat vest. The speed of the entire operation was so fast that the military officials beside her were dumbfounded. It was so fast that they couldn't even see clearly how she changed out the magazine and reloaded it back into the combat vest. Her speed made the generals of the various countries lean forward slightly. It was as if this was the only way they could see the enlarged figure of the female soldier on the screen more clearly and see if she could solve the problem. When the generals saw her change the magazine, eject the bullets into the magazine, and put them back into the combat vest, her quick, accurate, and ruthless movements immediately attracted everyone's attention. When the generals of the Kingdom of Islands saw this, their heartstrings almost snapped. The stark contrast between the two was an invisible pressure. No matter how tightly they clenched their fists, there was no way they could rush up and warn the male soldiers who were still shouting at the military officials. This was a competition and an actual battle, and it was a battle of strength between the winners and losers. If you lose, you lose. There's no excuse for it. General Carlyle was currently conversing in a low voice with a local lieutenant colonel accompanying him. His gaze was fixed on Yi Qian, as if he wanted to firmly remember her movements. This Chinese female soldier had already left a very deep impression on General Carlyle. In General Carlyle's eyes, who knew how many times calmer this female soldier was than the male soldier from the Island of Islands. From the moment she discovered the problem to the moment she dealt with it, she was quite calm. It seemed like she wasn't worried about the problem at all. If the female soldier was so calm, then the male soldier was probably even more so. China was a large country. No matter how weak a large country was, it was still a sleeping lion. When the lion woke up one day, it would be time for many people to be afraid. Chapter 2894. Yi Qian was as calm as General Callisler had seen her. However, when the bullet was stuck, her heart skipped a beat. Her heart skipped a beat because of her mistake and the agility of Ika's assault. The replaced magazine was loaded into the combat vest. Her nimble fingers were so fast that they became a blur as she finished replacing the parts as quickly as possible. Yi Qian's countdown from 120 could be heard from her comrades' headsets. Her calm countdown reached their ears one by one, allowing them to clearly feel her calmness. Her mouth keeps moving. What's she saying? She's very fast. The Chinese contestants have switched to single shots. They're matching the speed of this female soldier who made a mistake. She's about to start removing the holster. She's a very calm female soldier. The male soldiers from a nation of islands who also made a mistake are much later than her. It's a pity that they discovered the problem earlier than the Chinese female soldier, but didn't manage to deal with it in time. Can the Chinese female soldier change the holster in time and start shooting again? They only have 4 minutes left. For minutes, even if they change the parts, it'll still take 3 to 5 minutes. No matter how fast the Chinese female soldier is, it'll be difficult for her to finish shooting. The generals of the observation group whispered to each other as they discussed whether the Chinese female soldier could finish shooting in time. General Will, who had been watching the time closely, curled his lips coldly. With only 4 minutes, it would be difficult for the Chinese female soldier to finish shooting no matter what. There was no need to discuss her 10 points anymore. It was an irrefutable fact that her 10 points were deducted. General Will, why haven't I heard your opinion? At this time, General Will must have a lot to say. General Callisler, who was leaning against the railing, turned his head and asked General Will, who was 2 people away, with a smile, "What do you think? Can this Chinese female soldier finish shooting in time?" General Will, who had been watching the time, heard this. He held the binoculars in one hand and used the other to support himself against the railing. He smiled calmly and said, "There's only 3 minutes left. After 3 minutes, the 10 kilometers will be over in 1.5 hours. I think all of you can see whether the Chinese female soldier can finish shooting or not, right? I don't believe the Chinese female soldier can finish. This is an impossible task." Ahmed Abu, who was from a border country and had not participated in the topic of the Chinese team's participation, said coldly in broken English, "She can't do it. There's only one result waiting for her. All 10 points will be deducted." He spoke resolutely and decisively, as if he had already seen the final result of this round of competition. General Will raised his eyebrows. Colonel Mitabu was an early SFS Special Forces soldier. I believe he must have observed him carefully before. I'm sure. I'm more inclined to Colonel Amitabu's opinion. The time is too short, far from enough for the Chinese female soldiers to complete the task. It seems that the 2 of you have the same opinion. All right, let's continue to observe. Perhaps a miracle will happen. Yes, General Callisler is absolutely right. Now it seems that if the Chinese female soldiers want to complete the shooting within the stipulated time, they can only wait for a miracle to appear. But miracles never happen on the battlefield, Colonel Amitabu said sarcastically. He maintained his cold expression and continued to watch. He didn't believe that there would be a so-called miracle, and he didn't believe that the Chinese female soldiers could accomplish what all the generals thought was impossible. Chapter 2895. The strength of the Chinese soldiers was far inferior to his country's. The last crash must have been a ploy by the Chinese side to cause his country to lose an excellent pilot. Amitabh, who had a fierce look in his eyes, raised his binoculars again and focused all his attention on the Chinese soldier. He wanted to see with his own eyes how this female soldier lost the competition. After he returned to China, he would directly expose the Chinese soldier's major mistake in the military media, including the mismatch between the bullet and the pistol. The Chinese side had even sent such a female soldier. They wanted his countrymen to know that the Chinese side was a weak, poor, and powerless country. General Callisler saw that the 2 countries that did not want to see the rise of the Chinese side the most had such strong prejudice against them. There was a slight smile in his eyes. "Just wait, the 2 of you. Perhaps we will see a miracle." General Callisler said calmly and did not say anything else. He raised his binoculars and focused on the last round of shooting through the lens. If the leaders of the 2 countries thought of the Chinese side like the 2 people in front of him, then the developing Chinese side would be very relieved. The low-key and humble Chinese side only wanted to secretly strengthen their national strength and did not want to expose too much. Although it was uncomfortable to be looked down upon by the other countries, it did not matter when compared to their future strength, because one day, the whole world would see the strength of the Chinese side. When that time came, Who would dare to mock the Chinese side for being a weak country? The discussion of the observation team would not reach Yi Qian's ears, and it would not affect her in any way. Changing the parts required removing the stuck bullet. Modern firearms were designed with emergency disassembly in mind. If there was a problem with the gun, the battlefield would not give you the necessary tools to disassemble the gun step by step. Similarly, Yi Qian did not have the tools to disassemble a gun, but the grizzly bear pistol had a mortise and tenon design. With the help of the bullet, she twisted the mortise and removed the entire holster in an instant. The bullet was stuck in a holster. Yi Qian used the bullet to eject the stuck bullet out, reassembled the holster, and with a click, the mortise and tenon returned to its original position. Her movements were very, very fast. So fast that the military officials at the side could not help but rub their faces. So fast that the referee, who was watching intently, could not help but rub his eyes. They could not help but wonder if their eyes were playing tricks on them. Yi Qian was really too fast. So fast that it made them wonder if their eyes were playing tricks on them. Click, click, clang, duh. The monotonous and mechanical voice rang out. His comrades heard Yi Qian's initial number of 120 turn into 10, 9, 8, 7. The number in Yi Qian's mouth entered the countdown, and the generals above the observation group had already taken in many deep breaths of cold air. All the generals looked at Yi Qian. They didn't even blink as they stared at him. Inconceivable, too inconceivable. The female contestant from China completed a series of actions that required adjustment after a bullet jam, from unloading the gun to reassembly. And now, God, she started shooting. She only took 3 minutes to disassemble and reassemble the pistol. She's using continuous shooting. She caught up with the male soldier and fired a single shot. The voice of the observation team's general reached General Haywell's ears, causing the arrogant general's face to darken. His face was as gloomy as a dark cloud. When Ahmed Abu, who was in the border country, saw this, he used so much strength that he almost crushed the binoculars. Chapter 2896. Impossible. This is impossible. How'd she do it? She used 3 minutes to solve the problem in front of her and then continued to shoot to catch up with the other Chinese contestants. How'd she do it? Calm down, calm down. He had to calm down. Even if the Chinese soldier solved the problem, there was still shooting. That's right. There was still the shooting competition to be completed. Affected by the sudden situation, the Chinese soldier's mentality must have also been affected. Therefore, even if she solved the problem, she might not be able to complete the shooting. She might even get a score of 0 points. Colonel Amitabu thought to himself with a gloomy face. He really hoped that the Chinese soldier would get a score of 0 points. He really hoped so. Yi Qian, who only used 3 minutes to solve the problem, picked up his pistol and aimed at the bull's eye. He started counting down. 3, 2, 1. The numbers were clearly announced. All of her comrades who were waiting for her could hear the heavy stone in their hearts slowly fall back down. Good job, Qing Yao. That's great, Qing Yao. It was only then that Yi Qian's earpiece started to get lively. Little 8, not bad. As expected of Little 8, you're really good. 3 minutes, Little 8. Do you have 6 hands? Come on, Little 8. It's time for the finale. Knowing that the observation team's attention was focused on the Chinese team, the team members did not directly use their mission code names to communicate. Instead, they used numbers to communicate. Yi Qian was the youngest, so they were Little 8. G3 was the oldest, so he was Little 1. And Little 2, Little 3, Little 4. When Yi Qian heard Little 3, he almost lost it. If Big Eel knew the other meaning of Little 3, it would probably jump into the sea in anger. The corners of everyone's lips curled up slightly. A relaxed smile appeared on their cold faces. They calmly raised their pistols. With Xia Jinyuan and Li Jinyan leading the team, they completed the shooting coordination with Yi Qian. They began to aim for the 5th bullet. Ready to shoot. As Xia Jinyuan and Li Jinyan's voices rang out at the same time, the sound of gunfire filled the shooting range. Bang, bang, bang. The Chinese team finished shooting. After the 5 bullets were fired, Yi Qian calmly looked at her target and said to the military officer beside him, "Firing complete. 5 bullets have been fired. Please check." The military official's Adam's apple bobbed a few times. He cleared his throat and stared deeply at Yi Qian with his light brown eyes. Then, he led the referee over to check Yi Qian's position. The 8 Chinese soldiers put down their pistols at the same time and handed them over to their respective military assistants. The military officer's assistant quickly unloaded the magazine and counted the number of bullets inside. There were a total of 15 bullets. 5 of them had been shot, and the remaining 10 bullets were correct. The score and target position scores were quickly calculated. The Chinese team members checked their scores and confirmed that they were correct. After confirming that there were no errors, they immediately entered the next 10 kilometers cross-country break. 10 points were deducted from the male soldiers of the Kingdom of 10,000 Islands, while the rest of the team members finished shooting within the allotted time. Looking at this result, the commander of the observation team was unable to react for a while. He was completely shocked and could not calm down for a long time. The Chinese female soldier turned the situation around in the last 4 minutes. She successfully solved all the difficulties and scored 50 points with continuous shooting. Chapter 2897. Yes, all 5 of her bullets had hit the bullseye. None of them missed. All of them had hit the bullseye. She had scored 5 bullseye using continuous shooting. Any soldier knew that it was very difficult to hit the bullseye with continuous shooting. After firing the first bullet, you would not have time to aim again. When the recoil of the bullet vibrated your arm, it was bound to cause your crosshairs to deviate. A skilled soldier might be able to hit the bullseye with the second bullet, but when it came to the third, fourth, and fifth bullet, it was very difficult to hit the bullseye with every single bullet. Besides, this Chinese female soldier had been affected by the unexpected situation before the competition. Under such circumstances, it was even more impossible for her to hit the bullseye. But the unthinkable happened. Oh my God, is this true? The referee panel? Can I go down and take a look at her target? Oh my God, this is unbelievable. I really want to see how she can hit 5 bullseye. Did I hear wrongly? The referee told us that the Chinese female soldier hit the bullseye with all 5 of her bullets. I really wonder if I heard wrongly. No, you didn't hear wrongly. I also heard the referee tell us that she did hit the bullseye with all 5 of her bullets. It's a result that makes people wonder if they heard wrongly. A miracle that shocked all of us was created by a Chinese female soldier who had just participated in the competition for the first time. She was only a Chinese soldier who had just participated in the competition for the first time, but she used her strength to tell us that nothing is impossible. A shocking miracle. The generals of the various countries mentioned the words shocking and miracle many times in their conversations. It was enough to show how shocking Yi Qian's performance in this round was. General Haywill, Colonel Amitabu, this is a miracle. General Callisler laughed. The Chinese female soldier has accomplished something that we thought was impossible. This is a miracle that was proven with her ability. A miracle that was proven with her ability was not a miracle, but true ability. General Haywill, Colonel Amitabu, weren't you certain that the Chinese soldier would lose points in this technical subject? Weren't you certain that the Chinese soldier did not have the ability and could only pray for a miracle to win? Then this was a miracle that was proven with her ability. General Callisler deliberately said this to anger the two of them. Indeed, the 2 foreign generals were infuriated. Colonel Amitabh clenched the binoculars in his hands tightly. He turned around and stared at General Callisler gloomily. Even if she completes the mission in the end, it will not erase the stain of her equipment. Of course, they can't be erased. However, this Chinese female soldier was able to accomplish what you all thought was impossible. She didn't even need to trouble others to erase those stains for her. She used her own strength to erase the original stains. Colonel Amitabh, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You're able to correct your mistakes in a timely manner, and at the same time, do it in a shocking manner. All right, Colonel Midabu, there's too much personal grudge in your expression right now. I know you really want your SFS border guards to defeat the Chinese soldiers. I know you really want to, and at the same time, I support your idea. After all, this is a competition where there are winners and losers. Defeating the other side and winning for your country is what the 12 participating countries hope for. What you need to do now is to calm down. The competition has just begun, and there are more exciting things waiting for the participants. Chapter 2898. Colonel Amit Abu was about to go mad with anger. What on earth was General Kallisler, who always spoke up for the Chinese soldiers, trying to do? The Chinese did not even stand up to speak up, so why was he standing up? Applause rang out. This was the applause from the generals of various countries for the Chinese soldiers who were leaving. That was an amazing Chinese female soldier. She had used her strength to tell everyone one thing. No matter what the outcome is, you will never know until the last moment. The most important thing was that you never gave up. The applause provoked Colonel Amitabu. He was unable to control the anger in his heart. He punched the white railing so hard that it shook. He would never applaud the Chinese soldiers. Never. Shah Rukh, tomorrow, it's all up to you. Everyone in China is waiting for you to defeat the Chinese soldiers and win back the previous plane crash. This is a battle for glory between nations. Shalak, you must defeat the Chinese contestants. You must defeat them. No matter how gloomy General Haywell's mood was, he did not show it on his face. He even said very gracefully, "This is indeed a miracle that was proven through strength." General Kallisler is absolutely right. In that case, I think the Chinese soldiers will definitely give us more surprises next. He only said, General Kallisler is absolutely right. From these few words, it was clear that the arrogant General Haywell did not think that what he had said was wrong, nor did he think that he was biased against the Chinese soldiers. So what if the Chinese female soldier had proven herself through strength? Could she be compared to the elite Special Forces soldiers sent by the Americans? Impossible. There was no comparison at all. So what if they had proven themselves through strength this time? They had just used their strength to prove that they still had a certain level of strength and were not as weak as the generals from the other countries thought. That was all. The elegant General Haywell applauded along with the generals from the other countries and watched as the Chinese soldiers ran for the next 10 kilometers. They were cheering for the wonderful performance of the Chinese soldiers. However, Yi Qian, who had won the cheers, was currently being criticized by his captain, Q King, and it was a very severe criticism. During the competition, Xia Jinyuan could not directly criticize Yi Qian. Now that it was over, it was time to settle the score. The two of them formed a team, avoiding other comrades while covering each other as they moved towards the next target. At this moment, Xia Jinyuan's face and eyes did not have the slightest bit of tenderness. There was only coldness in his deep, unfathomable eyes. You should be glad that this is only a competition and not a real battle. Even if you make up for your mistakes later on, you've made the most stupid mistake, a mistake that shouldn't have happened. Check what the equipment contains. You didn't even check your life-saving partner properly. Did you manage to clean up all the equipment? Have you understood the true meaning of clearing equipment? It's understandable that the rules aren't completely clear, but the inventory and inspection of equipment. These are things that we have to do before every training in the country. How could you forget about it? Do you know that the most basic mistake can cause you to lose everything? Lose everything. Every single word from him struck Yi Qian hard in the heart. Every single word he said made Yi Qian feel ashamed. What he said was right. What he had just made was the most basic mistake. He had almost lost everything. Chapter 2899. The frontline observation team was still cheering for Yi Qian's brilliant performance. On the other side, Yi Qian was being criticized by Xia Jinyuan to the point where she could barely raise her head. She was indeed too ashamed to raise her head, but as soon as she lowered her head, the man who was criticizing her roared, "Raise your head." Do you think lowering your head after making a mistake is enough? Even if you've made a mistake, you still have to raise your head and face it head on. Correct your mistakes. There are no cowards in our team who would lower their heads after being criticized for their mistakes. At this time, Xiajin Yuan was the youngest, most tactful, most ruthless, and most indifferent brigade leader since the establishment of the Snowfield Brigade. When he scolded someone, he would scold you until you couldn't even raise your head, but you still couldn't lower your head. If you lowered your head, you would be admitting defeat. If you admitted defeat, you would be a coward. Yi Qian hadn't officially joined the Snowfield Brigade yet, but she had tasted Xia Jinyuan's ruthlessness several times. She had been beaten to the point of being hospitalized, punished to the point of almost fainting, criticized to the point where she was covered in cuts and bruises, and even if she lowered her head, she would still be scolded for being a coward. Holding her rifle tightly, Yi Qian raised her chin high. Even if she was criticized, she was still as proud as a pine tree, able to withstand wind, rain, thunder, and lightning, and the changes of the 4 seasons. A soldier should act like a soldier. Heads could be broken, blood could be shed, but the toughness that belonged to a soldier who didn't fear anything could never be lost. A soldier should just stand there. Even if you were wearing casual clothes, people would still be able to tell that you were a soldier at a glance. This was a type of temperament, a temperament that was different from that of an ordinary citizen. The temperament of a soldier that exuded from every movement was mighty, upright, and unyielding. Since they were mighty, upright, and unyielding, how could they lower their heads? If they made a mistake, they would raise their heads and immediately correct it. If they went around, they would raise their heads and not be arrogant or rash. If they lost a round, they would raise their heads and fight again in the next round. In short, no matter what, a soldier's waist and back must be straight, prouder than a pine tree and straighter than a bamboo. This not only represented the military posture of a soldier, but also the backbone and integrity of a soldier. Xia Jinyuan was such a person. No matter how difficult or how dangerous it was, no matter how difficult it was, no matter how dangerous it was to the point of bleeding, no matter how dangerous it was to the point of death, he would never lower his head. From the beginning to the end, he would always keep his back straight and face up. Yi Jian lowered her head because of her mistake. This was something that he would not allow to happen, and he did not want to see it happen. Xia Jinyuan, Xia Jinyuan, Xia Jinyuan, Xia Jinyuan, Jinyuan, Xia Jinyuans, Xia Jinyuan. You. Correct your mistakes. The mistakes. You knew you were wrong, but you didn't panic. You knew your mission and responsibility. You faced it calmly and corrected your early mistakes. You did very well in this aspect. You let me see how fearless you are as a soldier. Xia Jinyuan didn't just focus on Yi Qian's mistakes and be aggressive. He commented on all the merits and demerits. This made Yi Qian even more convinced. Just like the veterans of the Snowfield Brigade, they were criticized again and again by the new brigade leader. When it was time to be harsh, he was so harsh that it made the veterans tremble in fear. After a few rounds, he commented on all the merits and demerits one by one. He was impartial and took half a year to convince the veterans. Chapter 2900. At this moment, Yi Qian was just like the other veterans. Faced with Xia Jinyuan's harsh criticism, she accepted it humbly and clearly realized how stupid her mistake was. After scolding, being fierce, yelling, and praising her, Xia Jinyuan stood in front of Yi Qian coldly. His sharp gaze fell on her face as he asked her, "Did I say anything wrong?" "No." Yi Qian straightened her back and answered. "Did I criticize you wrongly?" He asked again. Yi Qian answered again, "You didn't." "Then do you know what you did wrong?" "Yes." "Very good. Now you tell me that you know what you did wrong. From now on, I will keep a close eye on you. If you don't discover the problem immediately, even if you're now a reserve member, I will apply to the higher-ups to delay your enlistment." Hearing this, Yi Qian's pupils constricted fiercely. Before she could catch her breath, the man who was standing in front of her suddenly took 2 steps toward her. When he was only half a step away from her, he slowly leaned over, lowered his head, and whispered something into her ear. Xia Jinyuan's low voice was as soft as a mosquito's buzz, but it contained the power of thunder. Yi Qian instantly straightened her body and stiffened. That one sentence took less than 3 seconds. Xia Jinyuan straightened his body and said calmly, "Return to the team." He spoke so calmly that it was as if the person who was full of hostility just now wasn't himself. Yes. Yi Qian's heart trembled. She took a deep breath, nodded in response, and turned to return to the team. She was in Team 2, so she naturally returned to Team 2. Li Jinyan knew that she was singled out to be criticized. He was the captain of the Storm Commandos. As the captain, he knew best what a stupid mistake his sister had made. If it were him, he would also criticize her harshly. Adjust your mood. This is the second round of the assessment. Li Jinyan didn't say anything comforting. He just reminded her. Did she need to be comforted when she was criticized for making a mistake? She didn't. She needed to reflect on herself when she was criticized for making a mistake. He had to reflect on his mistakes and reflect on why he was wrong. Captain Xia Jinyuan's cold and calm voice came from the headset. Continue to break through the encirclement according to the original plan. Keep an eye on your equipment. Don't let me see you lose your equipment. Team 2, gather for 5 minutes. We'll complete the rest of the plan before moving. It turned out that one of the participants from a country had just put down his luggage and went into the forest to take care of himself. When he came out, he found that his luggage was gone. Needless to say, the person who took away this participant's luggage must be an imaginary enemy. The members of Team 2 quickly assembled. Yi Qian laid out the map of the marching route, and Xia Jinyuan picked up a tree branch to draw on. They turned off all the communicators they had on them. Normal plans were spoken directly, but special plans, such as intentionally concealing their abilities, they would secretly gesture to prevent others from eavesdropping. The forest covered a large area, so Estonia didn't have full coverage control. The referees and military officials would only appear at the points where points needed to be tallied and penalized. At this time, Xia Jinyuan and the others could speak loudly because no one would be able to hear them. However, the Snowfield Brigade was a special operations team that liked to play in the dark. They were cautious and acted in the dark instinctively. They didn't care if there were cameras around them, but as long as there were comrades outside who didn't belong to them, they had to be careful. Chapter 2901. They were on high alert. Even if there was a camera above them, they would only be able to see their heads. They wouldn't be able to see what was below their heads. Yi Qian was sitting down, while the other 7 stood up close to each other. They leaned against each other's shoulders and leaned against each other's heads. They lowered their heads in unison and looked at the tree branch in Xia Jinyuan's hand. Then, they looked at the map on top of the luggage. Yi Qian sat down with the luggage in his arms. Every time Yi Jian, who was sitting with her luggage in her arms, looked up, she would see 7 faces that were painted with oil paint and had sharp and resolute eyes. We took too long just now. Let's shorten the time now. We are now in the top 10. Our goal is to make it to the top 5, but we can't jump to the top 5 all of a sudden. We have to take it slow. For this 10-kilometer rifle shooting, make it to the top 7. For the next 10 kilometers, make it to the top 6. For the next few days, we can't go back to the top 7. Do you understand? The path of the golden mean was the most difficult path. They couldn't lose, they couldn't win, and they couldn't be seen through. It was much more difficult than fighting for first place. Making progress step by step and making it to the top 5 or 6 was their original plan. But sometimes this plan couldn't keep up with changes. The pistol shooting just now almost made them the last place. We have to have a certain amount of time. If there are any unexpected accidents, we still have some time to deal with them. We won't have to rush like before. Everyone's hearts are tense. After looking down for a long time, G3 saw that the sweat on his forehead was about to drip onto Yi Qian. He quickly wiped his sweat and reminded his comrades to wipe their sweat so that it wouldn't drip onto Yi Qian. Yi Qian didn't even notice if his sweat had dripped onto his body. After Xia Jinyuan finished gesturing, she asked softly, "Do I still need to hide a little?" "No, you have to maintain your record." Xia Jinyuan denied and explained the reason. "You are a female soldier, and the only female soldier participating in the competition. If you walk out, you will attract attention. If you continue to hide, it will make people think that our motives are impure." His motives were impure. Everyone held back their laughter. Li Jinyin glanced coldly at Xia Jinyuan, who was trying to liven up the atmosphere again. He continued, "Since our side dared to send a female soldier, we have already told everyone that female soldiers are outstanding. The marksmanship that the female soldier has just displayed is proof of her excellence. It's very reasonable and convincing. It will also draw more attention to her, which will facilitate our impure motives." "All right, I got it." Yi Qian nodded. In that case, there was no need for her to hide her marksmanship anymore. She could use her marksmanship to cover for her comrades. Just as Xia Jinyuan and Li Jinyan had guessed, the generals from the other countries only focused their attention on Yi Qian. They only focused on Yi Qian. The rest of the Chinese team members did not pay much attention to them. The generals in the audience were still focused on the American team. They began to shoot while running. The American team finished the second 10-kilometer rifle race in first place, while the Chinese team was the 8th to enter the field. Shooting while running was naturally much more difficult than shooting while standing still. Even if the Chinese team was stronger than the American team, none of them could shoot 100 points while running. Chapter 29:02. Even the American team, who had always been strong, did not achieve a perfect score. The observer group did not have much hope for the team coming out later. The American team members were all members of the famous Triamphibious Special Forces. Each of them had to go through almost a year of assessment to enter the Army. After entering, they had to undergo all kinds of hellish advanced training every day. If they did not have a perfect score, how could the team members of the countries coming after them achieve a perfect score? When the American results came out, the generals of the observer group found it hard to accept. It's too difficult. How could they think of a rifle competition after completing 20 kilometers with weights and being chased by an imaginary enemy? At this time, all the contestants are seriously exhausted. Their muscles are so tired that they can't relax. Similarly, they can't concentrate. Under such circumstances, they still have to complete a rifle competition where they shoot while running. This kind of competition is too harsh. That's right. So, I don't believe that the contestants coming out later can complete the shooting very well and achieve a perfect score. Yes, it's impossible. They can't even concentrate. How can they complete accurate shooting while running? This is a technical competition that is very difficult to succeed in. To be able to score 86 points, I think it should be the best result. Seeing the American result, the best result was only 86 points. Even the commander-in-chief of the Estonian National Defense Force wondered if it was too harsh and difficult for all the contestants. After all, everyone knew how strong the American team was. Colonel Amitabu did not think so. Seeing this, he turned around and faced the generals of the other countries who were discussing behind him. He smiled and said, "I don't know if the contestants of the other countries can complete it, but I know very well that one of the contestants from our country can complete it." Once, he achieved the best shooting result after carrying 30 kilograms of weights cross-country. He achieved a perfect score and became a respected sharpshooter. So, I believe that our team member has enough ability to achieve a good result. There had never been a general who was so confident that his team members would definitely achieve good results. Even someone as confident as General Haywill remained silent when he saw the situation of his own team members. He secretly clenched his fists and cheered for his team members. Even General Haywill could not be sure of something. Coming from a country with a huge gap between the rich and the poor, even if they wanted to own an aircraft carrier, their own country would have to pay for other countries' retired aircraft carriers. How could they be so confident that their team member could win? It was a big joke, a joke that surprised them all. Really? It seemed that this round of rifle fire would be, Colonel Amitabu, May I ask how many of your contestants broke through the second blockade line? General Haywill thought that Colonel Amitabhu was looking down on the American participants. He was not a restrained and introverted general, especially in the 12 countries. Their national strength and military power were not enough to contend with the United States. What right did such a country have to look down on the American soldiers? As a general of a country, he had to stand up and protect the dignity of his country's soldiers. In front of so many generals from other countries, he said that the American soldiers were inferior to the SFS border defense country. This colonel from a country that was famous for having poor hygiene was really arrogant. Chapter 2903. Colonel Amitabhu was not an introverted soldier. Furthermore, they had always believed that their country could be ranked as the third largest country in the world. Their military and national strength were not inferior to other countries. Therefore, when faced with General Haywill's sudden question, Colonel Amitabhu calmly replied, "We're currently ranked 7th. I'm very confident that our country's contestants will be able to enter the top 3. These words were actually a little disgusting. Even if you really believe that your country had the strength to enter the top 3, that was only your own opinion. Why did you have to say it with an arrogant expression that said, "I'm in the top 3, and you can't possibly enter the top 3? Immediately, a Western country's general mocked. "Is that so? That's a little cruel. Why do I think that the Chinese contestants have the strength to enter the top 3? Ha ha, I think so too. Looks like the Chinese contestants for the first time really have a chance to enter the top 3. The Chinese have always been humble and never easily show off their strength. Who knows, maybe they really have a chance to enter the top 3. Hearing the mocking behind him, Colonel Amitabhu's expression darkened. His face turned green and white, and his expression darkened. We're not talking about which country can enter the top 3, but which country can achieve a perfect score in this round. I believe that our country's contestants have the strength to achieve a perfect score. General Haywill, is there a problem with me believing in our country's contestants? Oh, there's no problem at all. General Haywill shook his head solemnly. Soon, he pointed to the front and pretended to be surprised. The Chinese soldiers have already rushed out. If I'm not mistaken, the contestants that Colonel Amitabhu mentioned are all resting at the side. 2 10-kilometer cross-country breakthroughs with 35 kilograms of weight were already exhausting. Some of the contestants from other countries were even chased by their imaginary enemies and had already paid their penalty points. There are also some who ran out of the blockade line. The second they ran out, they directly carried their luggage and lay down on the wet grass to rest. This was the case for the SFS soldiers. After rushing out, they were so tired that they collapsed on the ground to rest. They were so tired that all their muscles were screaming that they needed to rest. Not only were the SFS soldiers resting, but other contestants from other countries were also resting after rushing out. There were also some contestants who, like the big eel, did not pay attention to their feet and directly fell. There were already several bloody incidents. Up until now, the time gap between the participants from the 12 countries had become even longer. The American team, who was in first place, only had 20 minutes to reach the Estonian team, who was in second place. However, the American team in third place had 45 minutes to reach the Estonian team. The Chinese team entered the 8th place according to the original plan, which was still very controlled. Otherwise, it was very likely that they would directly rush to the 5th place. Rushing from the 10th place to the 5th place in an instant was a bit of a leap, so it had to be controlled. When the 8th team rushed out, the person in front of them was none other than the SFS border guard led by Shaluk. They were competing with the other 2 countries, and they dropped from 4th place to 7th place. When Xia Jinyuan rushed out with his team, he saw the exhausted SFS soldiers lying on the ground beside him. However, he ignored them and only glanced at them from the corner of his eyes. He did not stop at all and continued to head towards the firing point. Chapter 2904. There is only one way to deal with an arrogant and conceited person. Ignore them. Treating an arrogant and conceited person with disregard would not only not lower one's status, but would also make the other party suppress their anger, even if they were angry. If they suppressed their anger as much as they could, the anger in their hearts would grow bigger and bigger, and their rationality and judgment would be affected. When that happened, they would be at a disadvantage even if they did not deliberately compete with them. Don't look at them too much. Let them know that we are ignoring their existence. Xia Jinyuan, who was running at the front, smiled faintly and reminded his comrades who came out behind him. The weather is so cold. Let them suppress their anger and let them keep each other warm. Using their anger to keep each other warm. Captain is indeed the captain. Even the words he says are different. Of course. Otherwise, how could he be your captain? Xia Jinyuan accepted his comrades' compliments with a clear conscience. At the same time, he expressed that his comrades were understanding people. You are a good captain, but you have led us astray. If we ignore them like this, what if their captain faints out of anger? What should we do? What should we do? If he faints out of anger, we will naturally send him to the hospital. What else can we do? Xia Jinyuan laughed. His laughter was not loud, but it reached everyone's ears through the earpiece. Yi Qian turned off his earpiece and smiled at Li Jinyan, who was supporting him as they walked. Don't be fooled by his carelessness sometimes. His comrades and the team all believe in him and respect him. You're just like him. Both of you are excellent commanders. Looking at his sister, who would occasionally put in a few good words for her boyfriend, Li Jinyan finally said something to acknowledge Xia Jinyuan. He is better than me. Yi Qian smiled like a crescent moon. In my heart, you are both excellent. There is no need to compare. Li Jinyan was also happy. At least in his sister's heart, he was not bad. However, Xia Jinyuan was actually better than him. He was an excellent commander. Otherwise, the military would not have directly assigned him to the Snowfield Brigade and become the captain of a pack of vicious wolves. After working together a few times, his tactics would always gain the approval of all the team members. It could be said that no one would stand up and object to any of his decisions. If there were any objections, Xia Jinyuan would be able to listen to them and analyze the objections raised by his comrades. He would also be able to determine if there were any areas where he had been careless. His meticulous thinking had long won the respect and trust of his comrades. His comrades and the Storm Commandos were convinced by him as well. At this moment, he was the first to rush out. He didn't even glance at the resting SFS border defense soldier. The rest of his comrades followed his footsteps and ran out as fast as they could, ignoring the SFS border defense soldier who was panting heavily at the side. There's still plenty of time. There's no need to fight anymore. Xia Jinyuan, who was running at the front, saw a group of strong Western team members raise their rifles. Then, he recalled the SFS border defense soldier he saw earlier and knew that they still had plenty of time. They were surrounded by more than 20 national defense soldiers earlier and almost tripped and fell. They had a hard time escaping and were delayed for a while. The 8 of them were worried that the 8th place would be snatched away by someone else. When they rushed out of the blockade, they couldn't help but feel anxious. Each of them held their rifles and ran toward the shooting point, afraid that they would fall behind. Chapter 2905. Now that they had rushed out to take a look, they realized that several powerful Western countries were still participating in the competition, so there was no need to rush any further. If they were to rush any further, they would probably not be ranked 8th, but 6th. This was not in line with their original plan. Did we rush up a few rankings without paying attention? The T6 combatant straightened his helmet that had been knocked askew by the leaves earlier. He shrugged his back and adjusted his slanted backpack. Holding his rifle, he widened his eyes and slowly retracted the ferocity in his eyes. Why do I feel like it's not easy to control our rankings? Look at this. We thought we had enough time, but who knew that there would still be a bunch of people who had not finished the second round of the competition? If this continues, do you think we'll be able to make it into the top 3? The Chinese team members had completely slowed down. Another 10-kilometer cross-country breakout had depleted everyone's energy at an extremely fast rate. Now that they saw that there were still 3 countries firing their rifles ahead, The tension in their hearts slowly relaxed. Their limbs also felt tired, and they wanted to sit down and rest for a while. When they heard the T6 combatants say this, they supported each other as they walked back together and started whispering to each other. "You're right. It's indeed very difficult to control our rankings and time in a competition where we don't know how much time each other will use." The G3 combatant took a big gulp of water and said in a muffled voice, "If we want to maintain our rankings in a competition where we don't know how long the other party will use next, we still have to discuss how to maintain our rankings." Li Jinyan, who was supporting Yiqian, said calmly, "For the second 10-kilometer cross-country breakout, we took 1 hour and 24 minutes, while the American team who left early took 1 hour and 5 minutes. They only took a little over an hour and 7 minutes in the previous round. In total, they took 45 minutes more than us and 20 minutes more than the host country that made it out of the second place. If we calculate it this way, our rankings won't change much within an hour and 20 minutes if we maintain our control over the next 10-kilometer race. Why won't it change? Those countries that are lagging behind will definitely think of ways to speed up and rush out. We can maintain an hour and a half, but they might be able to sprint to an hour. If that's the case, our rankings will definitely fall behind." Yao Zi questioned. "No, I won't fall behind." Xia Jinyuan, who was walking in front, said, "We came here with the intention of not losing too badly. We came here with a mediocre result, which is different from the other countries that are competing with each other. Therefore, their results in the first round are often more proof of their own strength. The times in the second and third rounds are to stabilize the time in the first round. The few strong countries ahead of us will try their best to catch up with each other in order to maintain their current ranking. Just like V8 said, the countries behind us in the rankings want to push their rankings up, so we have a general understanding of them. However, we have never thought of competing with them, so no matter how much they compete, it won't affect us. We only need to control the time for the third 10 kilometers to be within 1 hour and 20 minutes. Even if we fall behind, we will only be one place behind." Chapter 2906. That'll make a lot of sense. V8 nodded thoughtfully and said, "Then we'll have to do our best to crush the rankings of the countries behind us. Otherwise, it'll be quite embarrassing if they counterattack." What's there to be embarrassed about? It's just the beginning. There's still a bunch of results to come. We're just trying to stabilize our names on the time rankings today. It has nothing to do with the results. The T6 combatant chuckled, revealing a set of white teeth that looked a little like a beast's. There was even a cold glint in his eyes. What's next is a long-distance assault of 150 kilometers to complete all the competition courses. Our current results are nothing, and our tiredness is nothing either. When we complete the next 10-kilometer sniping run, the real suffering will only begin. After the T6 combatant's reminder, the rest of the team members could not help but laugh. Their eyes were shining with the same light. It was a raging fighting spirit that was ready to conquer the difficulties and not be afraid of anything. A 30-kilometer long-distance assault was really child's play compared to a 150-kilometer long-distance assault. Their laughter was not loud, but with several people laughing at the same time, the decibel level was a little high. It vaguely reached the ears of the SFS border defense troops who were adjusting their state of mind at the back. The SFS border defense troops were already complaining because the Chinese side did not even stop and directly pass by them. This was a very arrogant disregard for them. They did not even greet them. This was too much a bully. Furthermore, they were running so fast and easily passed by them with their rifles in their arms. They did not look tired at all, as though they were running light cross-country. Was that even possible? Did they secretly reduce their load? One of the SFS border defense troops highly suspected that the Chinese side was cheating. His words were echoed by the other SFS border defense troops. One of the team members immediately said to Saruk, "Captain, they're too relaxed. It's so relaxed that it's suspicious. Could they have really reduced their load? Should we raise our suspicions to the referees?" They could not accept how relaxed they were. This was an unscientific level of ease. Look, they can still talk and laugh as they walk. Even lifting their legs is so easy, not strenuous at all. How is this possible? How could the Chinese soldiers who were participating in the competition for the first time be so relaxed? They were being chased, driven away, and surrounded, although they had not entered the depths of the forest yet. And the surrounding environment was not as harsh as the depths of the forest other than being a little rocky. How could they possibly be relaxed as first-time participants? There must be something wrong. There must be something wrong. With two SFS border guards believing that there was something wrong with the Chinese soldiers, the other SFS border guards who were already prejudiced against the Chinese soldiers were also affected and unanimously believed that there was something wrong with the Chinese soldiers. Sherlock stood up with a gloomy look in his eyes. We'll know if there's a problem when we get there. All right, we should go now. Don't let the Chinese soldiers wait too long. It was indeed too easy, so he couldn't help but be suspicious. Xia Jinyuan and the others were talking to the referees and military officials. There were also special forces from other countries around them. The atmosphere was quite harmonious, and they did not show any disdain for the Chinese team. In fact, only a few countries were disdainful of the Chinese team members. After all, both countries had established diplomatic relations. The two countries had trade, and there were no territorial disputes. Naturally, they could get along peacefully. Sherlock's arrival with the SFS troops broke the peaceful atmosphere. He walked over and laughed. How did you get out so easily? We were all shocked by how relaxed you guys were. Chapter 29:07. Sherlock walked over and didn't speak yet, but Xia Jinyuan could see the hostility in his eyes. Now that he spoke, Xia Jinyuan looked at him calmly, waiting for him to say something else. Facing Xia Jinyuan's smile, Sherlock narrowed his eyes slightly and continued. We all carried 35 kilograms of weight and completed two 10-kilometer cross-country breakthroughs, but you guys were so relaxed. Friend from China, you guys are so strong that I can't believe it. He spoke a long paragraph in Chinese and only used English at the end. The intention was a bit sinister. The former meant that everyone carried 35 kilograms of weight, but you guys were so relaxed. There must be something wrong. The last sentence, friend from China, you guys are so strong that I can't believe it, was completely antagonizing the Chinese team members. The intention was so sinister that Xia Jinyuan's face couldn't help but become gloomy. He's saying we cheated, right? The face of the great mermaid that was tanned by the scorching sun by the seaside had a hint of hostility, like a shark in the water. If you don't mess with me, I won't mess with you. But if you mess with me, I won't let you off easily. Great Shark stared coldly at Sherlock, put down the rifle in his hand, and took a step forward and stood next to Xia Jinyuan. At the same time, young Sparrowhawk and G3 also ended the communication with the two foreign special forces soldiers and turned to stand next to Xia Jinyuan. Xia Jinyuan, Great Shark, young Sparrowhawk, and G3 were in a group. When they saw Sherlock's vicious intention, their faces turned ugly. Lieutenant Colonel Sherlock, I don't understand your words. Looking relaxed is equivalent to being strong. Lieutenant Colonel Sherlock, how do you relate the two? Looking relaxed? Strong? Don't you think this is very unprofessional? And it also shows that you are unprofessional? Xia Jinyuan, who didn't know how to tolerate other countries' language, could also do the same. A gentleman uses his mouth, not his fists. He was just talking. At the same time, in order to show his friendliness, he put down the rifle in his hands and didn't hold any lethal weapons. The referee, military officer, and several foreign special forces soldiers who were communicating with Xia Jinyuan didn't understand what Sherlock said before. So G3 very responsibly translated Sherlock's Chinese words into English. After that, he shrugged and asked with a blank expression, there's no way to understand what he wants to say. We're all carrying 35 kilograms of weight. But why are they so tired while we're so relaxed? Shouldn't he ask himself this question? Why is he asking us? I really don't understand. The referee, military officer, and other foreign special forces soldiers were silent for a few seconds. Yes, they really didn't understand. He then heard the Chinese special forces soldier ask with a puzzled expression, does he have other intentions? The special forces of the Shuiyu Brigade were the best at disguising themselves as pigs to eat tigers. Want to play innocent? Who wouldn't? The Chinese Special Forces soldier was from Italy. When he saw that the Chinese team member in front of him didn't react, he sympathetically patted G3's shoulder and reminded him with a smile, "Yes, friend, he has other intentions. He wants to ask if you guys reduce the weight, so you look so relaxed. Well, maybe you can understand it this way. You guys are strong because you didn't follow the rules of the competition, so you easily completed the second 10 kilometers. Chapter 2908. G3 was shocked and felt even more incredulous. How could he have such a scary idea? Every participant has to follow the rules of the competition. How could he think that we didn't follow the rules? Why would he think that? Why? G3's shock was completely dispelled by the question why. This made Sharuk look even more sinister. The Chinese soldiers didn't think in this way, and it was even more impossible for them to violate the rules and secretly lighten their bags. However, Sharuk from the SFS Border Defense Force said so and was so suspicious. What did this mean? It meant that Sharuk must have such an idea, but he didn't dare to do it. G3 stabilized the rear camp, while Xia Jinyuan acted as the vanguard. While waiting for Sharuk to answer, G3 successfully made the Italian team feel disgusted by Sharuk's behavior. This made Sharuk, who was questioned, so angry that his face turned a little green. This group of cunning Chinese soldiers was deliberately destroying the impression of the SFS Border Defense Force in the other countries. You're too agitated. I didn't say anything. I only praised you for your strength. Sharuk clenched his fists and suppressed the anger in his heart. He didn't want to punch them in a fit of anger. This group of Chinese soldiers was really sinister and cunning. The problem that originally belonged to them suddenly became a problem that the SFS Border Defense Force might have. Too cunning. There are many ways to praise the strength of the other country's participants. Why did Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk choose the most disgusting and doubtful way to praise them? I'm sorry, Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk, we can't accept your praise. We even seriously suspect that your motives are full of malice. The more Sharuk suppressed his anger, the calmer Xia Jinyuan became. Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk is actually suspecting that we lightened our bags. Since you have such doubts, why didn't you say it directly? There's an old saying in China, a gentleman is magnanimous, while a villain is always in distress. Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk is a knowledgeable person. I'm sure you've heard of this saying. As a soldier, why don't you say it directly? As a soldier, I feel ashamed of my words and actions towards you. To be honest, no Special Forces soldier in the entire Snowfield Brigade was a match for Xia Jinyuan. Since Sharuk had bumped into Xia Jinyuan himself, he could only blame Xia Jinyuan for criticizing him. He didn't wait for Sharuk, whose face was red with anger, to speak again. He clapped his hands and ordered the Chinese team members to assemble. Chinese team members, assemble. Team 2 was led by Li Jinyan. The four of them were talking to the Special Forces from other countries, so they did not pay attention to the situation in Team 1. When they heard Xia Jinyuan's call to assemble, the four of them apologized to the Special Forces from other countries and immediately jogged over. As soon as they arrived, they knew what was going on. Without saying a word, they immediately unloaded the luggage they had been carrying on their backs and put it at their feet. Xia Jinyuan said to the referee, "Since Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk suspects that we cheated by lightening our load, our team members apply to be weighed. If there are any, we will immediately withdraw from IKA assault and admit that we cheated. We are not qualified to participate in any international large-scale Special Forces competitions. If there are no, then I need to hear an apology from Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk. His suspicion has seriously damaged the image of our country's soldiers. Such a shameless idea is shameful to our soldiers." Chapter 2909. They even had to admit to cheating in the newspaper. This was no small matter. At the same time, it also meant that the Chinese soldiers couldn't have cheated. It was all because Sharuk's SFS border guard thought that the Chinese soldiers had cheated. The referee team looked at the Chinese soldiers, then at Sharuk, who was silent, and said in a deep voice, Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk, may I ask what basis you have for your suspicions? Just because the Chinese soldiers ran out so easily, and because you were resting and they ran directly to the shooting range with their guns, you suspect them of cheating? This is a soldier's honor. The Chinese soldiers fight for their honor, and you have to bear the consequences of the whole thing. Do you still have doubts now? Sharuk was completely led by the nose. He was so conceited that he impulsively stood up and made a ruckus without any basis. He could only lose against the Chinese soldiers, who acted with integrity. At this point, Sharuk already knew that their suspicions were wrong. The Chinese soldiers weren't stupid enough to tamper with the weights. With their cunning, they must have tampered with other aspects. Faced with Xia Jinyuan's pressure, Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk knew that he would be unreasonable if he continued to speak. He immediately admitted that he was wrong, but he wouldn't admit that he suspected the Chinese soldiers of cheating. This would undoubtedly be looked down upon by the soldiers of other countries. He bowed and apologized very sincerely. I'm very sorry. I didn't make it clear, so it caused a misunderstanding. I didn't suspect the Chinese soldiers. I was just shocked by how easy it was for them. I just wanted to express my praise for the Chinese soldiers' strength. I'm very sorry that my Chinese friends misunderstood. He wanted to settle the matter peacefully, but he didn't really want to admit his mistake. Instead, he insinuated that the Chinese soldiers had misunderstood him and that the Chinese soldiers were overthinking things. This apology made the 8 Chinese participants sneer. Xia Jinyuan laughed lightly, and his laughter was full of mockery. A misunderstanding that other than General Sharuk himself, everyone else thought was a misunderstanding. This kind of misunderstanding. Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk, why don't you just say that you were kicked in the head by a donkey and confused for a moment? It'll be more believable. You are kicked in the head by a donkey. It was said very bluntly. Sharuk, who understood the meaning, was so angry that his chest rose and fell rapidly. The captain of the Chinese team said that he was kicked in the head by a donkey. This was an insult to the Chinese. He had been scolded. Lieutenant Colonel Shaluk, who was so angry that smoke was rising from his head, could only clench his fist to restrain his urge to fight. Gritting his teeth, he said in Chinese, I don't believe that you are really that powerful. Just wait and see. Then you just wait and see. Come, let's see if our burden has been lightened. Xia Jinyuan looked at his threat with disdain and said to the referees and military officials, we don't feel guilty at all. Even if Lieutenant Colonel Sharuk admitted that he was wrong, we still insist on retesting the baggage for the honor of soldier. I'm very sorry, but we have to insist. The Chinese side had to insist, and they were insisting on the honor of a soldier. The referees had no reason not to cooperate. The 8 Chinese team members' luggage was placed on the electronic weighing scale, and one by one, they were checked. 35 kilograms was still more than that. That was the added weight of being soaked by sweat and rain. Chapter 29:10. This time, no one said anything else. The referee deliberately asked Sharuk to stand by the side. Every time a bag was weighed on the electronic scale, he would say to Sharuk, there is no such thing as weight reduction as you suspect. After all 8 bags were weighed, the electronic scale that was used to weigh shotguns was put away. The referee asked Sharuk, do you have any other questions? At this moment, Sharuk was no longer as arrogant as before. He was obviously unable to maintain his composure. He immediately replied to the referee, besides, we didn't have any problems from the beginning. It was all a misunderstanding. Everything was a misunderstanding. It was a good excuse to get out of this. The Italian Special Forces who had been watching the whole time glanced at the SFS border guards. Since it was their turn to start shooting, the captain of the Italian Special Forces patted Xia Jinyuan's shoulder and said in English with a heavy accent, don't take it to heart. They are just jealous like a woman. It's really disgusting. This was also considered a humiliation to the SFS border guards. Xia Jinyuan lightly bumped his fist and replied loudly, I don't take it to heart. I just feel disgusted by their actions. Then teach them a lesson later so that they won't even dare to be jealous. The captain of the Italian Special Forces patted Xia Jinyuan's shoulder again. Good luck, friend. Shahruk's face was as dark as a piece of coal that had just been unearthed. His country's people were already tanned. Now that he was a little darker, he gave off a gloomy vibe. He originally thought that he would be able to find fault with the Chinese soldiers and make them unable to raise their heads. Who knew that in the end, it would be them who couldn't raise their heads? The SFS border guards who first suspected that the Chinese soldiers had secretly lightened their load were still unwilling to give up. Seeing that their team member was being humiliated, they angrily said, "They must have used some method that we don't know about. Lieutenant Colonel, we can't let them off so easily." Yes, they couldn't let the Chinese soldiers who had humiliated them off so easily. Amitabh, who had heard about this, was so angry that he drank several mouthfuls of cold water in order to suppress the anger in his heart. "Lieutenant Colonel Shahrukh, it's all up to you now. Teach these cunning Chinese soldiers a lesson." The SFS Border Defense Force did not think that this matter was over. Similarly, the Chinese soldiers did not think that this matter was over. Shahrukh didn't suspect anyone else but the Chinese soldiers. From this, it could be seen that they simply thought that the Chinese were easy to bully. The Chinese were a country easy to bully, and the Chinese soldiers could be humiliated at will. A poor and weak country. In their eyes, we're still a poor and weak country that they can bully and humiliate at will. The T-6 combatant fastened his luggage again. His eyes were bloodshot. That's what they think. That's why they'll only suspect us and not the other country's members. Gunshots rang out from the front, but the Chinese team members did not raise their heads to look. They just quietly packed their bags and waited for their captain, Xia Jinyuan, to speak. They were waiting for the commanding officer, who was as majestic as a mountain and would never let any other country humiliate their country, to speak. In terms of time, as long as they are in 4th place, we will always be 10 minutes behind them. If they're in 5th place, don't give them a chance to catch up. Don't score too much higher than them. 10 points should be enough. Xia Jinyuan spoke. His cold voice was filled with a strong, murderous intent that could only be detected by the special forces of his country. Chapter 29:11. We won't let you go too far, and you'll always be behind by 10 minutes. Let me tell you, China will only guarantee 5th place. We'll use our strength to tell you that it's not that China can't surpass you. It's just that they don't want to. If you fall behind, then sorry, China will always be 10 minutes ahead of you. It's useless for you to catch up, and you'll never be able to shorten the 10-minute gap. This was the declaration of war from the Chinese team. Not convinced? Fight me if you can. Fight me until you're convinced. Everyone, stick close to one of them. Don't be too far apart. Just maintain a distance of about 3 meters. 3 teams have already passed. If the SFS border guards want to maintain 4th place, remember, we want 5th place. Leave Shahrukh to me. Before the competition, Xia Jinyuan quickly deployed the tactical arrangements for the competition. He only had one goal, to suppress the SFS border guards and make them unable to move. Every team member stuck close to one of the SFS border guards. They wanted to bite them until they were angry, but they had no choice but to hold it in. With Xia Jinyuan's words, the morale of the Chinese special forces was high. Their red eyes flashed with an inviolable coldness. They were ready to fight for their country, and all they had to do was wait for the SFS border guards to respond. The Italian team finished the rifle competition. The results were not very satisfactory, but they felt that it was reasonable. The difficulty of the rifle competition this time is much higher than the previous ones. Now that we've seen such a result, we need to learn to accept it. Although it's very difficult, it's still a pity. The top 3 contestants in the past didn't get full marks. It's such a pity. It's a pity, but we also found a problem. The running and firing rifle competition has become the most serious technical subject. If the top 3 couldn't do it, I don't have any hope for the rest of the country's results. Colonel Amitabh thinks that his country can get full marks. Ha ha ha. I hope the final results won't make him faint. If there really is a country that can get full marks, I think China has a chance. China? Is that right? But I don't think so. When the generals of the observation team saw the results, they all lowered their heads in disgust. Everyone's expression was full of regret. They really didn't expect the running and firing rifle competition to be so bad. Then, what about the sniping competition? Wouldn't that be worse? Moreover, the sniper competition was intentionally scheduled to begin after dark. They had to hide in the arena for a long period of 3 hours before the competition could begin. This was not an easy competition subject to complete. Because the results of the rifle shooting were not perfect, the generals of the various countries were worried about the following sniper competition. Even the best score of the American team in the World Elite Tournament was only 86 points. No matter how good the results of the participants from other countries were, it was impossible for them to surpass the elite special forces from the United States. It was taken for granted that the results of each country were not outstanding. Although there were regrets, it was an acceptable phenomenon. Colonel Amitabu saw that the Italian team's results were average, so he had high hopes for Shaluk. Shaluk was also very confident in himself. There was only one country they wanted to defeat, the U.S. Right now, even the U.S.'s best score was only 86 points. He was absolutely confident that he could beat the U.S. As for China, such a weak and poor country was nothing in his eyes. He would tell those cunning Chinese contestants that they could forget about surpassing the SFS Border Defense Force. They would use their actions to ruthlessly humiliate them, making them unable to raise their heads in front of the SFS Border Defense Force. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.